It is chaotic right now. This is probably the craziest life has ever been for us. Let's get this thing done. Let's take care of this. Let's schedule this. Let's schedule that. What nanny's going to help us here? Who's going to cover this? It's all transactional. We're trying to run this thing that we call our family.
Question I always ask my clients is, what is money going to do for your kids to make their life better than it did for you?
Some people are going to come into your life to remind you who you don't want to be, how you don't want to be, how you don't want to operate. Guarantee there's right now somebody listening who's feeling some conviction right now, thinking, I've been trying to end this relationship. So never be afraid to cut ties with people who are holding you back. The American capitalist, right? I think it can all be boiled down to gratitude and your reputation. So I became an overnight success at 34 years old.
And we just signed Michael Chandler. He is now part of the UFC family.
I'm a perfect example of that blueprint for it takes longer than you think.
You're 10 years younger than me, but it's impressive that you've learned a lot of these lessons a lot faster than I did.
It's the conundrum of the athletes, right? We think we have to have the cars and the houses and the jewelry. I made that first $100,000 check, and all of a sudden,
kick to the face!
Within 2 years of leading the league, 78% of NFL players are bankrupt. Mm-hmm. And I read that and I was like, shh.
I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but I like it's new what you're telling me.
I've always looked at it differently. I've always looked at it like I'm an entrepreneur whose shiny object is this fighting thing. And I pour myself fully into the fighting thing, but it's just another way to get me closer to the end goal of.
Michael Chandler, welcome, man.
Thank you for having me, dude. Appreciate it.
I'm super excited, to talk to you here today. I'm going to start this out. I've been doing a lot of research on you. And there was a quote that you said, when you connect your gratitude with your why and what you do, the sky is the limit.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
Tell me a little bit about that.
I get asked all the time, right? Because I'm known as the hardest working guy, everybody sees my workouts, how hard I go, how intense I am. So the question always arises, well, hey, how do you stay motivated? How are you so inspired? How do you find the gumption to wake up every single day, do it consistently, do it past your comfort zone, put in more work than everyone's willing to? And honestly, it just has so much to do with, and it took me a while to realize it, because at first I think it was insecurity, or it was striving to try to be what people thought I couldn't be. And then all of a sudden I realized, once I got to a certain point, it was all about being so grateful for the opportunity that I have. Mm-hmm. And realizing that God has given me some amazing gifts to be on a platform, to inspire, especially young men, to have a voice, to be looked at as somebody who is doing something, trying to do something bigger than he ever thought that he could do. And it all comes back to gratitude every single day. When you operate within gratitude, in the good times and the bad, because I've had a lot of bads, I got the scars to show it. Like I've had a lot of bad times, but even in the bad times, I'm always grateful, because every single setback has always led to something better that has been in store for me. And when you just start to operate from that gratitude, man, it starts to unlock more of your human potential.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And I couldn't agree more. And I don't know what to show you if you knew what you're getting yourself into when you said yes to it.
I knew. I did my research.
But and that's kind of my mission, is to change the lives of 1 million people through financial literacy, and that's kind of the tool that I can deliver to people. And so everything I try to do, whether it's the book I wrote, the businesses that I built, this podcast, is to, like you said, create a platform to reach more people. And in doing that, I think the hardest thing, Michael, quite honestly, has been to change minds and mindsets, right? Mm-hmm. Because you talk to people and it's like, oh, I'm too poor, I'm too brown, I'm too black, I'm too lazy, I'm too this, I'm too that. And the truth is, they start to believe that stuff. And by believing that stuff, it gives them limiting beliefs, and it puts them in this cage of what I call becoming a second-class version of yourself, mm-hmm. right? And I think, looking at you, you grew up, it seems to me, maybe not poor, but no silver spoon for sure. No. And I know you talk a lot about your dad and your mom and what they've done for you. Can you tell me just a little bit about like how you grew up, some of the challenges, and how that formed you today as a man to get rid of those limiting beliefs?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be quite honest, I've struggled with them my entire life. Mm-hmm. And if you look at where I'm at, the platform I've been given, the bright lights I've been under, the money I've made, the friends I have, the the millionaires, billionaires, and celebrities in my phone that I rub elbows with and spend time with. If you would have asked the 14-year-old me, the 13-year-old me, the middle school me that I would be here, he would have thought you were absolutely crazy. And actually, quite frankly, he would probably tell you that I was going to become a more evil version of myself. You know, like we said, it's like I didn't grow up with a silver spoon. I didn't grow up poor. You know, and I had some poor friends. I mean, we're talking dirt floor poor. I'll never forget some friends of mine who I wrestled with. They lived in a little house down by the river in High Ridge, Missouri, Cedar Hill, Missouri. And the front deck, the front porch was ripped off the house. And there was a 2x6 going from the ground over a ravine and into the house. That was their front. That was their front porch. And then you walked into the kitchen and the floorboards were falling out. There was holes in the ground. I mean, I grew up around these type of people. So I'm not saying I lived like that, but I think more impactfully, unfortunately, is we had more money than I was mentally conditioned to believe that we had. Like we were doing fine. I had everything. We didn't have a lot, but I wasn't missing a dang thing. We had love, we had security, we had a roof over our head, we had clothes on our backs. But it was more the mentality of the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer, and to treat anybody with money, a nice car, a nice house, some property, climbing the rungs on the financial, the socioeconomic ladder, that should always be looked at with skepticism, you know? So even as this cognitive dissonance of all of a sudden I win the Bellator tournament, I make $100,000 in 3 fights and I holding this big check with, 5 zeros on it. And I'm thinking, holy cow, I'm not supposed to be here. Right. And you win the world title and then more money comes and then the bright lights come and then all the admiration and adoration starts coming. And you think, well, wait a second, like this feels a little bit uncomfortable. And I self-sabotaged myself many times in college wrestling, and I've self-sabotaged myself in my fight career because we're constantly battling the inner demons of that voice and that lie and that story that I've been told since I was a kid, that success and that amount of money or that amount of wealth or that amount of platform was reserved for other people, not for me, you know? And I think I got so mad at the way I grew up for a while, and I got so mad at myself that I always say I'm a little guy from a little town who was taught to do little things. I'm like, God, I hate that little guy. I want to kill him. I want to slay him. I want to get him out of my life, right? But he's also protected me, and he's also kept me humble, and he's also made me realize that so many hundreds of millions of people across the globe have that little guy or that little gal inside of them. And for me to talk about him and say, I still got him. I haven't been able to slay him, haven't been able to get rid of him, but I've gotten really good at duct taping him to the basement of my mind with a roll of duct tape around his mouth to quiet him. And I think that's a really good message for so many people, that if I can unlock my full potential, and I'm still working on it daily, if I can do it, so can you. So it's been a process, and here I am a couple decades in, and I'm still failing every single day trying to fail forward.
Yeah, so you said just exactly what we're hitting on, that mindset. Okay, that's for the rich. Like, these people are going to have this, they're not going to have that. Who in your life broke that mental mindset for you? Was it your parents?
It wasn't. And I love my mom and dad. Like we talked about, I always give them their flowers. I would not be sitting here today without Mike and Betty Chandler. My dad still to this day works with his big old brown work boots on, his Red Wing work boots, his white carpenter pants, and goes in and puts in his blue collar 40 every single week, right? And my mom has worked 2 and 3 jobs when we grew up to make sure that we had everything that we needed. And it was really funny. It wasn't until I went to college, left High Ridge, Missouri, left Jefferson County, Missouri, went and walked on to the University of Missouri. And it was my first time I was around people from other places than I was, right? And my across the hall dorm mates, a state champ from California, a very affluent family, came from money, probably on a full ride scholarship. But then his roommate was a adopted young man because his mom and his dad were both gone and passed away by the time he was like 8 or 10 years old. And he ended up becoming one of my best friends, right? So you see that dichotomy between those two socioeconomic backgrounds, right? And then some other guys who were from different states with a ton of money, and then other states from not a lot of money, right? And you start to realize, okay, wait, we're all just here with one common goal. We're going to get in that wrestling room. We're going to get after it. And when you walk through the threshold of that wrestling room, it doesn't matter how much money you have or what kind of car your dad drives or what kind of law firm he runs or what kind of doctor he is or what kind of dad or mom on welfare that he is. We walk in here and none of that matters. We lace up our wrestling shoes and we go get after it, right? And that was when it started to open up my mind to all these different backgrounds that I was never really, I guess, exposed to. And then most importantly was my Bible study leader, who was our orthopedic surgeon, our team doctor, a guy named Bus Tarbox. And we never really talked about money ever, but it was my lens by which I saw money. And I remember when I was younger, it was like, well, if you make a lot of money, you're probably a shrewd, get over on people, step over people type of individual. And then all of a sudden I realized that this was maybe the most loving man I'd ever been around in my entire life. The greatest father, the greatest husband, servant to the community, leading Bible studies. And every single, I think it was Tuesday nights, we would go over to his house for Bible study, and he'd already be at the table doing his homework with his 2 daughters and just led with love. And he was such an amazing human being. And I'm like, wait a second, like this guy's got money. He owns his own orthopedic practice. I see it right across the highway over there, and it's got his name on it, and it's got all this stuff. It's like, he's got money. He's got means. He drives a nice vehicle, and he's got this nice, big, beautiful house in this very prestigious neighborhood in Columbia, Missouri. Isn't he supposed to be the enemy? Isn't he supposed to be the guy that I would need to watch out for? Yet he just accepted us all with open arms. And that was probably the moment, the relationship, the experience that really started to change my mind. And I thought, well, shoot, how much more can I impact people and eventually someday love my wife and eventually someday love my children and eventually be a light to this entire world if I operate that money is not a bad thing. Finances and financial literacy and financial freedom and having maybe more than you need is not a bad thing, because by having more than you need, you can bless so many other people with it, and that was the real experience and relationship that really changed my mind.
It's a great point, man, because I think sometimes we demonize people that are wealthy, especially if you come from an inner city or somewhere where you're looking at the poverty that's around you and you feel entrapped by it. But the same thing, I grew up super poor. I got into this industry by the grace of God, and I got exposed to things that I was never exposed to before and started realizing, just like you, like there are some good people out there and they have 2 arms and legs just like me. And hey, if I put in the work, potentially I could achieve these things as well, which is super important. And I think, for me, it was a police officer. For you, it was this gentleman that led your Bible study. I think the sad thing is that some people just don't ever come to a point in their life where someone gives them that olive branch that says, for me, it was just someone just saying, hey, you're hanging around these shit bags. Mm-hmm. You need to get out of here. You're better than that. And as small as that seems, for me, it was like, okay, yeah, you're right. And for you as this person, that's what we try to do, is just with this show, is bring that hope to people, mm-hmm. Bring that knowledge to people, because, the show's called The American Capitalist, and people are like, oh, it's just about money. That's not really what it is, right? To your point, I think, money is something, it magnifies. If you're a piece of shit, you're going to be a bigger piece of shit. If you're a good person, you're going to be a good person. And capitalism, to me, works when everyone can participate in it. And the problem is most people just don't know how to participate in it. And they don't think they're going to have that path. So let's talk about that a little bit. And let's talk about, obviously this gentleman helped you, but I know faith plays a big role in your journey. And I think you talked about St. Francis. I think there's a quote that is, maybe you tell me, something about leading by example, essentially, mm-hmm. and not proclaiming all the time. There's some people preaching, hey, Jesus in your life, and I think that turns off so many people. Yeah. Talk a little bit about how you implement that in your life.
Yeah, I'm not exactly what who actually said it, but it's preach the gospel at all times, but only use words when necessary, right? And faith is different things to different people, right? We know pastors who speak from the pulpit every single weekend. We know people in my position who are athletes or former athletes who have this big platform. A guy like Tim Tebow, a friend of mine. Like, I love his message and what feels authentic to him and how he shares his faith. And then there's others of us who maybe speak less about God and less about our faith and less scripture, but people can feel where our faith lies by being around us, the way that we live, the way that we move, the way that we operate, the way that we love and serve, the way that we live our lives. And I think it needs to be said that we should always be living how it feels authentic to ourselves, right? And I pray for wisdom every single day of how to be a man of God and how to continue to move forward in my faith, both publicly and privately. And yeah, I mean, it's been when you talk about success, when you talk about money, when you talk about the fame or the platform and all these different things that people throw at me and they're like, oh, you're a celebrity or you're this and you're that. And like, to me, I just feel like I'm still Michael Chandler from High Ridge, Missouri. And that's why I'm so thankful that I have the path that I had. It's almost like I can't break it. Not that I can't. I have my moments of ego. I have my moments of narcissism. We all do. We're human. We're prone to wander. But I always default to, well, I'm just a guy trying to get after it, trying to work harder than everyone else and try to lead with integrity, right? And I feel like that little guy from that little town has continued to keep me humble through all of the successes. So I can't be mad at him, right? And then also too, the great Zig Ziglar, rest in peace, said that the diamond and the gold are reserved for God's people, not the devil's bunch, right? And how true is that in life, that we see these certain people and it's not that they don't deserve success or not that they don't deserve to be at the platform that they have or the money that they have or the means that they have, but they don't exactly maximize to make a dent in the universe with what they've been given, right? And if you know that you can be trusted with a lot, if you know that if all of a sudden the lottery gets hit or all this money rains upon me or the biggest platform I could possibly ask for, you got to ask yourself and look yourself in the mirror, would I be a good steward of that? And I think that takes time, it takes energy, it takes effort, it takes experience. And I think I've just been slowly growing and slowly building a foundation and slowly brick by boring brick building this platform that I have so that I was ready for when everything took off, right? Because in order to be trusted with the big, the large, the massive, you must first be able to be trusted with the small, right? Be trusted in Bellator for 10 years, working just as hard as everybody else when I wasn't getting the recognition as one of the top guys in the world. Being the walk-on at Mizzou and eating crap for an entire first couple years, coach not even looking at me for an entire year or even saying anything to me. Everybody else gets 4 sets of workout gear. I get 2 because I'm a walk-on and I'm probably not going to make it. I'm probably going to quit, right? I get a pair of hand-me-down wrestling shoes or a pair of hand-me-down running shoes because I'm just the walk-on kid. I'm so thankful for that because if I would have came in as a blue chip recruit, I probably would have drank too much of my own Kool-Aid. I wouldn't have had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder to outwork everybody and say yes to this workout, say yes to that workout. Being on speed dial for returning All-American Tyron Woodley, who ends up becoming, a great friend of mine, my big brother who goes into mixed martial arts, and that's the reason I go into mixed martial arts. Catching the eye of Ben Askren, who says, you know what, you're not very good at wrestling. Like, you're not good much at all, to be honest with you, but you want to work hard, you want to do the right things, you want to get good grades, you want to be a good asset to the team. Come with me and let me take you under my wing. And all of a sudden, boom, my skill set just goes to the moon because I was trusted in the small things before I gained the massive things. And it's been that humility, not that I don't have my moments, because I definitely do, right? But it's all connected back to, once again, gratitude and the faith and not just who I am, but whose I am.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a great point. And you talk about being a walk-on. I don't know that everyone knows exactly what that means. And, the idea now is trying to understand as an individual, what are the things that formed you? That's what really this is about, is how, everyone's looking at your success now. Obviously you have challenges. We all have challenges, but people are looking at all the wins that you have. They're looking at he has a beautiful home and he's traveling all over the place and he's going to the Fanatics. Like, they're in the spotlight. But what were the things that got you there? And I love this about you, is that, when you hear about adversity, I've seen 2 things happen. You'd have brothers that grow up. I'm a good example. My brother's in prison. I'm here today. I'm doing pretty well. We both had the same situation, right? And so when I talk about it, I talk about how adversity made me who I am today. Not having food in the refrigerator, gang violence, my mom being in drugs, my dad leaving when I was young. And I talk about those are the things that made me who I am and gave me the opportunities and the gratitude that I have today. I haven't talked to my brother in a while, but if you ask him why he's where it's at today, it's going to be because the adversity that he had, my mother on drugs, and all the same things that we both experienced are what put him to where he's at today. So, what's flipped that switch? And one thing I wanted to ask you also, I know you have 2 brothers, I believe, and a sister. It seems like there's a pretty big age gap, because I wanted to ask you that question of what's going on with your brothers, because you're obviously this huge success, you guys, but they're pretty young right now. Can you talk a little bit about that?
They're a couple years younger than me. My middle brother is a couple years younger than me. He lives here in Nashville.
Okay.
And then my youngest brother is in San Francisco. So
Okay.
he's a city planner in San Francisco. That was
Okay.
the dream job that he wanted after he graduated college. He took a job for, I think, a year in Missouri, and then the San Francisco job, which is kind of the mecca of city planning, obviously, with, if you think about all the craziness that's happening inside of that city and how progressive they are with the railways and the walkable and bikeable and all these different things. So it's like a dream job for a city planner. And then my middle brother is a actor, writer, director, producer, lives here in Nashville. So he does some film stuff.
Okay.
When it comes to success and growth and all of these different things, we're all in a kind of different places, but it all goes back to the foundation that was built by our parents. Mm-hmm. You talk about integrity, you talk about honesty, you talk about guys who want to do the right thing. You talk about awesome, supportive, committed, loyal husbands and boyfriends, fathers. My brother Matthew's a father. My parents built that for us, right? And that's where you look at even the dichotomy between how we grew up, right? Like, I could sit there and I could complain about my circumstances. Right. I could sit there and I could complain about my problems. I could sit there and complain about him and her and them and that did me wrong. But if we took all of my problems and I threw them right here, and you took all your problems and threw them right here, and the next 1,000 people threw them right there, I'd quickly go, okay, well, I don't want any of that, none of that stuff. I'm going to go ahead and grab my own problems. I'm going to pull them back here and be like, okay, I'm just going to be more grateful for the problems that I have, because they are nothing compared to a lot of the problems that other people have, right? And it's that mindset shift and that perspective, going back to gratitude of is it really as bad as you think it is, or is it just your perception of how bad it is? And how much are you going to let it hold you back? Because, and it's something that comes with age. It's the wisdom of being a little bit longer in the tooth, right? I know a lot more today than I did 20 years ago. And if you would have asked me 20 years ago, I would have told you, yeah, I didn't All-American because of this, or I don't have this because of that. And I'm blaming other people. And as you get older and you start rubbing elbows with these people, the people that you look up to, every single person that you look up to, every single person that you admire and want to be like, because everybody who's listening right now has those 2-3 people on their Mount Rushmore of who they want to emulate and who they want to be like. Every single one of those people has successes, and that's why you look up to them and want to be like them or see shades of who you want to be. But they also have some huge failures, some huge setbacks, a huge amount of pain, sleepless nights and tears and all these different things that they've been through. But we don't follow people because of the virtual certainty of their successes and what they have become, but mainly because of what they have gone through, and that's why you never know how your story is being written in the moment. You only have the blessing of the perspective of looking back and realizing, man, God had me in the palm of his hand the entire time. And yeah, that sucked. And yeah, that was painful. And yeah, that was horrible. And I didn't think I was going to make it through that one. And then all of a sudden you do, and you look back and you think about how beautiful of a blessing all that adversity was. And then you can look at yourself in the mirror and realize the galvanized individual that you've become, right? And it's just been, man, the foundation that my parents built for us. I have no other option but to outwork everybody else, right? And that's why I feel so truly blessed to have that example. Yes, they didn't tell me that I could be a millionaire. They didn't tell me that I should leave the county lines. They didn't tell me that I could be an entrepreneur. They didn't tell me I could be a celebrity and be under these bright lights. They didn't instill that in me, but they did instill in me the most solid foundation that I could have ever asked for.
Who do you look up to?
Man, I've had so many people in my life now who are businessmen, philanthropists, people who are doing great things. I would just spent some time with Ed Milet, who's a great friend of mine. Man, listening to him speak and his voice and his message, and then to realize that obviously the financial success that he has, that's all well documented, but the impact that he is making and how every single heartbeat is less about him and more about other people. And it's a beautiful thing too, right? We all start with scarcity, right? We both grew up in scarcity scenarios where it's like, I'm not quite sure what's going to happen. Then all of a sudden you have some success. And then once you have success, you have stability. And once you have stability, then you kind of get into that significance phase of your life. So to have guys like Ed, just spent some time with Ben Newman, who is a huge performance coach to a bunch of different professional coaches, Bedros Keuilian, Dan Fleischman, who we met through here in Vegas, just to watch the way that these guys operate, how they inspire, and how obviously their businesses are taking off and their platform is growing. But it's so much less about the profit and it's more about the people. And if you focus on the people, the profits are going to ultimately come, because we as human beings can't help ourselves but to be inspired by those who are selfless and serving other people.
And so looking at that, what's your why? Who are you doing all this for? At the end of the day, when Michael Chandler's gone, he's left this world, who do you worry about talking about you, and what do you want them to say?
Man, I mean, obviously now being a father, the lineage of my children who are going to carry on and do amazing things in this world, and my wife. You know, I made a promise to her over 10 years ago. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary that I was going to love and protect and take care of her. And back then we were in a lot different situation than we are now, and I'm very truly fortunate for that. But I always say, you know, every move I make, every decision I make, every microphone I'm in front of, camera I'm in front of, is another brushstroke on this masterpiece that I'm painting, right? And I'm painting this hopefully beautiful masterpiece for my children to see, but not for them to necessarily hear the words that I'm speaking or see me on camera, but for, you know, actually right now, I had an awesome conversation with a guy named Tyler who plays for the Belmont basketball team yesterday. He was a walk-on. So he's like, I got your shirts, and my dad's got your shirts, and my brother's got your shirts. We're like your biggest fans. And I remember exactly where I was when you fought Dan Hooker and this and all these things. And I was like, man, I'm sitting here just, you know, I get goosebumps thinking about it, because ultimately today, at some point, Tyler's going to interact with Hap, you know, and it's not about the words that I say to Hap and who I think I am to Hap. I want him to hear it from guys like Tyler. I want him to hear about it from guys like you. Next time you see one of my kids, like, hey, this is who my dad is to you. And this is this masterpiece that he painted. This is what it means to me and how it changed me or how it shaped me, because I can sit there and talk to him all day long about who I am and what I accomplished and how great I did. But to hear it from other people, that's truly what it is, right? So when you think about legacy, that's the way I always think about it. It's your reputation. You know, we're sitting here talking about the American capitalist, right? I think it can all be boiled down to gratitude and your reputation, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, who are you to other people? And we can't get so caught up in it that every single move we make, we think about how other people are thinking about it. We are operating and running our own race and having other people watch it to then be able to go spread your message of who you are and who you are to them. And then ultimately for me, who I am to those people, and having them at some point or another, whether it's a 1-word interaction or a 2-hour conversation with my children, to say, hey, this is who your dad is, and this is what he has done. And I don't truly know that if you believe or know how much he's impacted that many people.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's pretty profound. I think, you know, when you become a father, I became a father for the first time 17 years ago, and recently again, my wife, we have a son now, is a year and a half. It changed me both times, I think. And you said something in terms of you're getting a little longer in the tooth. I'm 50, so I'm a lot longer in the tooth than you are. But you know, I think the most underestimated statement out there is there's no substitute for experience. Yep. Like, you don't really get it until, like, everything that I've learned has come from mistakes that I've learned in my life. And I think I've been a pretty good father to my daughter. I know I could have been better. So I'm trying to take that down with my son now. And to your point also, I try to tell people, right? I've worked with people that are worth $5 million. I've worked with 2 people that are worth over $1 billion. And you reach a certain point of wealth, and I think it depends on your lifestyle. If it's California or Tennessee or whatever it is, where it's like, is it 3 million or 10 million, to where there's not a lot more you're doing with 100 million than there is at 10. And so you've got to find that balance. And again, yeah, it's the American capitalist, but that's about the whole journey and what money means, and to your point, what it provides. And if it provides you just being away from your family all the time, being an absentee father, not being a good Christian, doing all those things, is it really worth it? And you know, one thing I struggle with my own family, and I know the people that I work with who've accumulated wealth that are raising kids, is you talk about where you're at today because of the adversity and the challenges and the scarcity and maybe not having money. Now, my kids, your kids aren't going to grow up with that. And so the question I always ask my clients is, what is money going to do for your kids to make their life better than it did for you? Mm-hmm.
It's a great question. I mean, I think ultimately, you know, you think about this world that we live in, and you have to have money. Like, it's, you know, what our friend Dan says. Yeah. I love what he says. He's like, people say it's rude to talk about money, and Dan's like, I think it's rude not to talk about money. And the first time I heard that, I'm like, hold on, Dave, Dan, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that, right? But then all of a sudden I start thinking about, man, we got to talk about money more, right? Because without money, you can't do anything. Yeah. You cannot eat, you cannot drink, you cannot live. We need money. And that's why Zig Ziglar said, it's not the most important thing, but it is reasonably close to oxygen, right?
You like Ziglar.
I love Ziglar, man. And, I'm an old soul. Shout out to my mentor, Chris Patterson, who introduced me to his stuff years and years ago. Yeah, I mean, our kids aren't going to grow up with that lack, right? And more importantly, teaching them the value of money while they will never have a lack of money, right? Still, whether you have $100 billion or $1 billion in the bank, or you have $10 in the bank, you can still teach your children the value of money, no matter how much you have in your bank account, right? So for me, my children are going to know that we have money and we have the ability to buy a lot of things. We have the ability to waste this meal and buy a new one if you want to, right? I don't like this car anymore. I'm just going to buy a new one. I don't like this house anymore. It's a little bit too small by 10 square feet, so I'm going to buy another one. We can make these decisions and have these choices, but it doesn't mean that we don't always boil it back down to the value of a dollar, right? And going back to what you said too, thinking about the adversity and how long it takes, the experience, right? I think, thank God I had my children and then even more successes at the exact time that I needed to, right? Because if I had the mindset that I had 10 years ago, it'd be a lot different story. But it's not that people don't do the right things, it's that they don't do the right things for long enough, right? Can
you say that again? Because I've heard you say that before.
Yes. Well,
it's really important.
It is, because it's not that people don't do the right things. It's that they don't do the right things for long enough, right? And especially, and this is the unfortunate thing for young children right now, young men, young women, we've gotten so used to this get rich quick, overnight success. It's so easy. How easy is it right now to make money? You and I could sit right here on a napkin and figure out a way to make $1 million in the next 3 months using the internet, selling gummy bears on TikTok. We're going to refurbish these skateboards and we're going to turn them into something. We can sell them on the internet with very, very minimal barrier to entry because of this thing called the internet, right? So while it's such a beautiful thing, and it's not the reason that we connected because we met through a friend, but we would have eventually connected through the internet at some point. Mm-hmm. It would have happened. If I want to be friends with you, I could do it over the internet. If you want to be friends with me, we could do it over the internet. And it doesn't take that extra effort and that extra work. And it could happen overnight, right? We could be, through this conversation, I could put you in touch with somebody else because of the internet, right? Mm-hmm. And we've gotten so used to and so conditioned to things happening so quickly and so easily with less and less work that it's conditioning people that, once again, it's not that people don't do the right things, it's that they don't do the right things for long enough. So the mindset is, well, I'm seeing my friend over here making this much money doing this on TikTok, and this influencer doing this on influencing and making money with very little work. It's just fun video camera and some microphones and stuff, to where overnight we're expecting to have more success than we actually deserve. And I feel like I'm a perfect example of that blueprint for it takes longer than you think, right? I had a question on my podcast yesterday. We call it Walk On Wisdom, because I'm a walk on, and I'm not an expert in anything, but I know quite a bit about a decent amount of things. And the question was, hey, how do I deal with having more patience, right? I'm so proud of and happy of how long it took me to really become an overnight success. I became an overnight success at 34 years old after 13 years of grinding in the sport of mixed martial arts. And at that point, 20 years of hand-to-hand combat, till I finally became an overnight success. And I'm so thankful for that. So practicing gratitude and having a solid foundation of integrity, and then practicing patience.
Yeah. One thing I always tell people also is, look, I spent a lot of time investing in myself, studying, becoming what I thought was one of the greatest wealth advisors in the world. But without the relationships that I was able to develop, without people opening a door for me, I never would have been where I'm at today. And I tell people, investing in relationships takes time, and it's not going into them with your hand out. And I believe nothing happens by chance. I'm a big believer that God is responsible. He opens the door for everything in my life. It's what I choose to do with it is what the outcome becomes. And it's just, as I'm listening to you talk, it's just so funny. I think I always say everything good in my life, I could point to a relationship. Everything bad in my life, I could point to another relationship. And even just you, as I'm sitting here, I remember we were at dinner in Newport Beach, where we lived about 5 years ago. A guy named Miles, I don't know if you know, acquaintance, Art Kirchner, he lives out in Newport. Yeah. And Miles said, man, it was the first time I met Miles through mutual friend Josh Altman. He said, everything you're saying, there's this guy, Michael Chandler, and I've been a boxing fan, but not an MMA fan. I looked you up. He's like, I got to introduce you to you guys. You're so like-minded, right? This was 5 years ago. And then I told you about mutual friend Sean Ryan. Met Sean, and then Sean had you on his podcast, and okay, so I learned a lot more about you, and I watched all of it for 2.5 hours, and then just out of the blue, I think January, February, Dan calls up, come out to lunch. He didn't even talk about you, like, oh, Michael Chandler's coming by. It's just strange, man, how that works,
It does. Well, and it's just like what you said, though, too, relationships, right? Relationships can lead you to the most amount of joy, peace, happiness, contentment, success, and they can also tear you completely down and make you dirt floor poor and beat you down to your knees, right? So it is so important who we spend our time with. And I think especially, once again, going back to how connected we are as a society now, and it's so easy to get intertwined with so many relationships and so easy to be connected to so many different people. The best kind of relationships most of the time start like this. 5 years ago, a mutual friend of ours, like Miles, to where it's like, okay, you can vet people through other people rather than just Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Like you can vet them through the people that you know. And it is a beautiful thing too, because as the older I've gotten, because one of the biggest mindset shifts I've had to do, kind of talking about business, is everything's kind of been on my own, right? Like I have to step on that line, shake your hand, and wrestle you. I'm out there by myself. I got my coaches in my corner, but they can't help me. They can yell things, they can coach me a little bit, but they can't put it in the half Nelson or get the takedown or get out of this hold. I have to do it, right? So it's very much an individual sport. Same thing with mixed martial arts. I'm locked into a cage in the middle of Madison Square Garden. I can hear my coach, or I could hear my coach if it wasn't so loud. And most of the time I don't hear my coach because my fights are very, very loud. But it's like they can yell and help audibly, but they can't actually help physically. So I've had to somewhat change my mindset to, hey, I've been an individual, and every single thing I've accomplished has been on my own from a physical standpoint. Every fight that I won it. Every fight that I've lost it. Every wrestling match I won, every wrestling match I lost, I won or lost those. But it was a group effort, and I do have my coaches and my mentors and my training partners and my training staff from the recovery side of things. And as I've transitioned more into business, realizing that if you want to go fast, go by yourself. Obviously, you can get things done real fast because I'm in charge and I can do it. But if you want to go really, really far, go with other people. And that's really kind of what I've built my business side of things on. And I'm still feel like I'm a toddler in the business space, right? And I get humbled often and working into it. But man, just the relationships and as I said earlier, like you never really know until you look back and you realize God's had you in the palm of his hand the entire time. And sometimes he puts people into your life for the rest of your life. And it's going to be a lifelong relationship, a lifelong friendship, mentorship. And sometimes people are just going to come into your life for a season. And maybe sometimes, whether it's God's plan or not, some people are going to come into your life to remind you who you don't want to be, how you don't want to be, how you don't want to operate, to remind you of things, to remind you to be, gentle as a dove, but also wise as a serpent, to realize who you don't want to be and how certain people make you feel, to be able to say, okay, don't want to be like that. Let's get them out of my life. Let's push them out of my life. And guarantee there's right now somebody listening who's feeling some conviction right now, thinking, I've been trying to end this relationship with her or end this relationship with him. And let me be the first to tell you, I've lost a lot of friends, or, I guess lost contact with a lot of friends, missed a lot of weddings, a lot of birthday parties, a lot of fun stuff in order for the greater good of this platform and this life that I've built. So never be afraid to cut ties with people who are holding you back. They're either the wind in your sails or they're the anchor holding you back.
I know you've spoken about it before. And, when I brought you on the show, my goal is, how do I get Michael Chandler to talk about some of the things he hasn't talked about before? And it's a lot of wrestling and all of those things. And then how do I get him to talk about some of the successes, who made him successful? I want to spend a lot of the time talking about some of the business things that you're doing. And I also found out that you have a degree in personal finance and real estate, which I don't think a lot of people know. So has that helped you out?
Yeah, I mean, it just obviously wrestled at Mizzou. I was personal financial management services with a emphasis in real estate, which was just a couple semesters kind of just looking at some real estate stuff. And it has. I mean, I think if anything, it helped continue to open my mind to money and how money works, right? Because the only thing I knew about money growing up was there wasn't enough of it, and it was hard to make. And if you wanted to make it, you had to work really, really hard, spend a lot of time, and be away from your family, be on a job site, be at at an office and working for it, right? And then now now I've shifted it more to, man, I can make money while I sleep, or I can make money with other people, a very large amount of money for a short amount of time while also making an impact. There's a lot of different ways to make money compared to the way that I grew up. And then going to college, realizing and learning more about money, learning more about real estate, learning more about business. It by no means taught me how to be an entrepreneur necessarily, but it taught me enough of a foundation about money to have a little bit more. So I always, I made that first $100,000 check. The first thing I did was set enough aside for taxes and then bought a house with it, right? So it wasn't, it's the conundrum of the athletes, right? We think we have to have the cars and the houses and the jewelry and and then all of a sudden the football, baseball contract ends, or all this, before you know it, you lose a couple fights and that contract ends. And this sponsorship, this endorsement ends. None of it is ever really secure. So that to me is a blessing, because I've always been, if anything, overly cautious in order to build a foundation financially and have more financial literacy and seek wise counsel about finances to get to a place. But yeah, man, it's been a fun road, and learning is get kicked in the teeth a couple times.
What's the first investment you made?
The first investment I made, I guess technically you would say buying a house in Nevada. So buying a house was the first thing I ever had. That was an actual appreciating asset. I ended up selling that house a couple of years later. I actually bought it in, Vegas got hit hard by the 2008 financial crisis. So I bought that house in 2010 or 11, I believe, maybe 11.
Pretty good time.
So it was kind of right after as the city was coming back a little bit, but the prices were still nice and low. So I bought a brand new house for like $141,000. It still had drywall dust in certain areas. It was brand new. On Perla Del Mar in south of Las Vegas, because I thought, well, if I'm gonna have this money, I'm gonna do something with it, and I'm gonna go ahead and buy a house, because that was kind of my first thing that I felt like was an accomplishment for me, right? And then ended up selling it for 3 times that a couple years later, after I rented it out for a couple years after I left Vegas. So that turned into a nice little investment. That was the first one, and then I thought, well, shoot, if I can rinse and repeat this a couple times, we can build a nice little nest egg.
Do you invest a lot in real estate now?
A decent amount. I've lived in 3 different homes since I've lived here in Nashville. Oh, wow. So that's been nice, obviously cashing out on the equity as this city,
got it at the right time.
As this city has continued to grow, right? And it's always been like, I bought a house in San Diego, sold that for a nice profit, and then moved here. We built a house here and then sold that house for double. Sold the next house a couple years later for double. So just by living in our primary residence, which isn't necessarily like the best for most markets, that's not the most investment savvy thing to do. But in a market that's growing like crazy, you can always say, hey, if I can just put this amount of money down, yes, I'm going to pay some interest, which obviously I can write that interest off, or some of it at least, and then sell it and then move to another house. And now we've moved into a house that's big enough for me, my wife, and our 3 kids. So yeah, it's been good.
Yeah, I think home ownership is. I bought my first house when I was in college at 19 for $56,000 in Mesa, Arizona. I think I wound up selling that for about $85,000. So I thought I was rich after that point in time. But if you look at the statistics today, at where wealth is for the average American, the vast majority of it, 70-80%, is in their primary residence. The rest is in their 401k. So I think a lot of people bastardize buying a home, that it's a hard, difficult investment. But I think if you take that out of the equation for most people, it's pretty difficult. And it's just one of those things, I feel like, again, not everybody has the discipline. Not everyone's getting the lesson. It's that forced savings that you're forced to do versus pissing it away on rent or something like that.
Well, and for me, putting money away towards retirement has been huge for me. I opened up. I started with a self-employed 401k or self-employed IRA.
Yeah.
SEP.
Solo 401k or?
Well, it was a SEP.
Self-employed pension
IRA,
plan. Yeah,
right? Yeah. But then there's a limit. Once you start making a certain amount of money, now you can't use that anymore. And then we moved to a defined benefit plan. So I'm basically maxing that out every single year. So that's a nice big tax shelter. And that could be somewhat of a, people have different opinions on it, because obviously you can't touch it until you're 62 or whatever without certain penalties. But it's been a great way. I always think about it, if I can keep more money in my pocket and pay less taxes, then obviously that's going to be a sound strategy for wealth. So
yeah, a lot of people don't realize that, especially when you're making money, you're in the pretty high tax bracket, right? So all that, instead of paying taxes every year, it's deferring. Yeah, 59 and a half, you could start to take some of that out. And I think that's, one of the challenges. I want to back up a little bit, because I think you hit the nail on the head when you started talking about athletes and some of the problems and some of the things that can go wrong. And this is what I spent a lot of my career with. I first started working with NFL players, and the first NFL player I ever worked with was about 17 years ago. His name was Levi Brown. He came out of Penn State. He was, I think, number 6 first-round draft by the Arizona Cardinals, signed a $62 million contract as a left tackle, which was the highest paid ever to an offensive lineman. He went to Morgan Stanley for a little while. I think it was Morgan, maybe Merrill, and just was disenchanted what's going on over there. And someone told me, like, hey, again, a relationship, a CPA that I did some work with, hey, Levi's going to be out there interviewing people. Are you willing to sit down and talk to him? And I said, yeah, but there's no chance that this guy's going to hire me. I'm a small firm. I'm working out of the back of his CPA's office. And before he came in, though, I did some research online. Google was around at that time, and I started Googling NFL players and this guy's name. And the first thing that came up was an article by Sports Illustrated, and it said that within 2 years of leading the league, 78% of NFL players are bankrupt. Mm-hmm. And I read that, and I was like, shit. So immediately, it went from greed to fear. In my mind, I was like, first I wanted him, I got to get this client. Then I'm like, well, shit, what if I bring this guy in? My name gets associated with it. He files for bankruptcy. Like, dude, I'm done. No one's ever going to work with me. And so when Levi came in, I asked him what was important to him. And he said, basically, again, he grew up pretty modest upbringing. I just don't ever want to go broke. Mm-hmm. And so I said, okay, if you're going to work with me, here's what you got to do. You're going to be on a budget. You got to realize, even though you got this big contract, that's not what you can spend. And to his credit, it's funny, he's actually a wealth advisor today at the firm I work for. He's got 3 college degrees. I make fun of him. I think he's still driving one of the same cars. He's got every dollar more that he ever made in the NFL. But it's an idea, if you can get to people early enough, if you can get that mindset, you can change lives. And even today, I worry with these influencers. It's kind of like athletes, podcasts. Like, they're getting these, who's your daddy, 130 million. Like, they're getting all these contracts. I don't know that stuff's going to last forever. And with athletes in particular, and I think worse with the sport of boxing is where I've seen kind of the worst part of it. What they don't realize when they're getting these big checks is that money that you're making today is probably going to be 80 to 90% of, for most people, of your lifetime income. And it's not the $3 million or the $10 million that you just made. What I try to tell people is, after tax, let's say that 10 turns to 8, it's roughly a 4 to 5% number you could spend. So your lifestyle needs to be based off of around $400,000, which is an amazing lifestyle for most people, but they're spending $1.5 million, $2 million a year. They don't understand that. And so the lifestyle that they built up in the NFL or fighting, I'm sure in the MMA, whatever it is a $1.5, $2 million lifestyle. The lights go out, the podcast gets canceled, you get cut. NFL is one of the only major sport that doesn't have guaranteed contracts. So you could sign $62 million and make $5 million, but these guys have already spent contract nine years away from now. Yeah. The light goes out, the lifestyle is 1.8, they've got 400, and then they're bankrupt. So how did you realize that early on? Yeah, I mean, I think, once again, the blessing and the curse of, I could be mad at the things that I was taught about money growing up, right? But it has shielded me and helped me in so many ways. And I've always, I don't know what I guess adjective to put on it, but I've always looked at the end while I'm still in it, right? I always talk about this vision I have. At some point, I'm going to take those gloves off for the last time, and I'm going to be standing in an arena somewhere, looking at myself in the mirror, having just showered, and I'm never going to get to fight again. Did I do everything that I could with the talents that God gave me, right? But that was the physical side of things, but also the financial side of things, realizing that I am truly blessed to live the life that I live and get paid the way that I get paid, not just from the fighting side, but the business partner side and the sponsorships and endorsements. And eventually that stuff will end, right? Mm-hmm. The fighting stuff will end. I can kind of, the blessing and the curse of kind of the influencer thing too, is this platform that I've built up. I can continue to carry on with that after I get done fighting from an influencer side of things or a voice side of things, and people will still put a dollar amount on that, of course. But those checks could ultimately become smaller and smaller and smaller, right? So my wife and I have always lived below our means, or at least we think we do. I'm sure you've worked with a lot of people who are like, I'm living below my means. And you're looking at the numbers, and you're like, not 100%.
And I think more than anything is, and this is where I've been able to differentiate myself. I feel like I've always been an entrepreneur that decided to fight rather than a fighter this entire time, right? I've just been using, I call it the shiny object. I've been using this mixed martial arts thing as a shiny object for people to look my direction. Whether it is the young man from a small town who was taught to do small things, who was inspired by my story, and if Michael Chandler can do it, then I can do it, all the way to think of the biggest name that you can think of who was like, well, I kind of like this guy though. I like the way, what he stands for and how he operates. And oh, and by the way, he fights in a cage for a living. How cool is that? I want to be business partners with him. Oh, wait. And I just vetted him through 6 people that I know. And these 4 people know him personally. And he's got a great reputation and he's never screwed anybody over. And he's a man of integrity and he does things the right way. I've always looked at it like I'm building this reserve of relationship capital that I really haven't tapped into at all. I've never, if anything, that's the one thing that has held me back is, man, me and you could be friends for the next 5 years and I can serve you and serve you and serve you and you can serve me and we can be friends and we go out to dinner and we do this. It's like, this is a deep relationship, right? But I still have that little guy inside of me that's like, well, wait, but don't ask Rob don't ask him for a favor. Because all of a sudden, if you ask him for a favor, he might think you've been laying this foundation this entire time and the relationship wasn't actually real because now you're asking for something, right? And you know who helped me? We talked about him earlier off camera is David Meltzer. He's just like, hey man, I'm going to start getting mad at you if you think of me and you want to ask me for something, but you don't. He's like, I'm literally going to be mad at you. Like we're going to be in a fight, and it's guys like that where you start to realize, well, wait, he's in where he is and he has no problem asking people for things, especially if you know your heart is pure. Like I said, if we could have a 5-year real deep connection relationship and then all of a sudden I ask, hey Rob, can you help me with this thing?
Yeah.
You know any connections with this? Can you help me for a path forward with this? And starting to unlock that and realize, hey, if you know your heart and you know that you enter into these relationships with no handout whatsoever, similar to what you said earlier, it's okay to ask for friends because ultimately too, I'd be robbing you of the opportunity to help me because we all know we love helping people. We love serving people. We love taking care of people. I'm the type of guy where you call me, I'll be like, oh, absolutely. Let me figure this out. I'm gonna spend the next 4 hours trying to figure this out for you. Yet I wouldn't have that same mindset if I asked somebody else. Right. So it's been something I've had to get over as well,
Dude, but it's such an important thing, man. I think what you're saying for people who have been in that situation, I think you've probably had to have reached a certain level of success so far to experience that. I think if you're still trying to come up, maybe that doesn't resonate with you, but everyone listening to this show, my goal is for them to hit that point at some time. And I struggle with it too, man. It's one of those things, like you said, I'm just the guy where literally any friend asks me for anything, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to charge them, whatever it is, because this is a friendship. And the way I grew up, all you had was your word. All you had was your reputation. And so I invest so heavily in, and maybe it's not a great thing of what people think and say about me. I'm just going to be honest. It's still very important to me. And I never want someone to say like, oh, he just used me to get to this person or used me to get to that. Even, dude, creating this podcast, it's like, okay, at the end of the day, what I'm trying to do in my mind is a much bigger mission than money. Money is not even in the equation because at this point in my life, and I heard you talk about it, when people come up to me in the airport or whatever it is that see me from Instagram or saw me on Fox Business, is like, hey man, like I've changed my life because of you. I'm investing now. My relationship is better. Like, dude, you said I get ghosted. Like it's just so powerful for that. But I know right now 99% of people don't know who I am. I'm not Michael Chandler. I'm not Michael Jordan. I've made an impact and I've done okay. But in order for me to change lives, I need to get this message out. And it's a message I know that will change people's lives. So I'll be honest with you. I was like, dude, this guy's going to be a fucking pain in the ass. He just met me. He's texting me. And I didn't want to do it. But I listened to you. And one of the challenges, Michael, was like, I'm listening to you on this podcast, on these podcasts. I'm reading about you. I'm like, fuck. This guy is so articulate. It can't be the real him. He can't be this smart. He's so poised. He's so this or that. And when I got into social media, I spent so many years in traditional media. One of my friends gave me advice. Solomon Durney said, dude, you're great on Fox, but if you're gonna be successful in social media or podcast, you gotta talk like you're talking to your boys in the back room. Like you gotta talk to them because that's how you're gonna resonate with people. And it's all these people in relationships, but it's the balance of when can I ask for this and when do I ask for that? But I agree with what David Meltzer said, and I've done his podcast, and Dave's a great person, is I think if your intentions are pure, you have to ask, right? And it's never you go into anything looking for a handout. And I don't take tabs of what did I do for this guy, and most of the time I'm never going to ask for anything. But if the point in time does come, and I think you can impact someone's life, I think you're obligated to ask.
Yep. And I think about that a lot for me too. I think about the amount of money and platform and celebrity and all that stuff that I've left on the table because I've been so afraid to do anything other than mixed martial arts in a lot of seasons of my life because I just know how focused I get when it's time to go into a training camp, right? You know, you and I could be like, hey, we're going to start this business together. Let's do it. We're going to start this show together. We'll start this together. And it's going to have all these awesome spider web of how it's going to change people's lives and make money and build the platform and bright lights and stuff. I know that somewhere down the line, I'm going to get that phone call from Dana White or Hunter Campbell, and I'm going to have a opponent and I'm going to have a date. And for 2 or 3 months, I'm not going to be available. And once again, going back to what you said, my word is my bond. And if your word is no good, then eventually you are no good. And my fear of not being a man of my word, eating into my reputation because I wasn't a man of my word, that's been one of my biggest fears. Because if you can keep that name clean, if you can keep the reputation intact, if you can keep your word strong and make your word your bond, then things are going to work out for you in the long run, right? So I've been so afraid. And I think it's definitely, like I say, it's held me back. And I do think it's the enemy. I do think it's him trying to make me play small because I could have definitely done a lot more. But I do think, once again, it's not that you're not doing the right thing. It's that you haven't done the right thing for long enough. And going through that process and having the self-awareness enough to know, hey, I'm holding myself back here for sure, or I'm stifling myself here. Sometimes you need to go through those seasons to finally unlock an even better, even more full potential of yourself later on down the line.
I agree. And you know, we're talking about relationships now and the importance of having those relationships in business. I talk about it all the time. And then the other tough thing, I think, for people listening to this who are just starting out, it's like, well, how do I build a relationship with Michael Chandler? How do I build a relationship at the highest level? And, you know, one of my friends, Bobby Castro, said is you've got to wait for the invitation and you got to make yourself worthy for the invitation. Mm-hmm. And I know that Bobby's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I know that you also say that humans are built for massive focus and that you spent 365 days a year becoming who you are today in the octagon, started with wrestling, who you are. And I think it's that commitment, that drive to excellence. And I say, I don't care what it is, whether it's MMA or you're a dentist or you're an HVAC person. What inspires me, I'm the kind of guy that will cry in the Olympics at figure skating. And I can't stand figure skating, but it's not the figure skating or the gold medal. It's the commitment, the sacrifice, the discipline, the things that they missed out on, that they committed to becoming excellent. And that's what I'm attracted to. And I want to learn all about it. And that's why, you know, the show about and why having you, it's not the wrestling. That's just the tool that you used. And why I believe you have relationships is because you've achieved that certain level of success. But I think, quite honestly, Michael, you would have done that in anything else that you would have done. It's that passion and commitment. And so I tell people, don't just get on Instagram and become an instant expert and all these things, put a camera in your face. I wasn't on Instagram until 4 or 5 years ago, right? I'm 50 years old. I was in the media for 12, 13 years. What I will tell you about Instagram, I made more money monetizing Instagram in 1 year than I did in 15 years on traditional media. But I spent a lot of time becoming great before I shouted out that I was great or tried to educate other people on Instagram. What's your thoughts on that?
No, man, it is once again, we as a society, we are all just a byproduct of how social media and how the internet has changed things big time, especially for the younger generations, you know, and going back to athletes and stuff, to this NIL stuff now where college athletes are getting paid crazy amounts of money, and that's going to probably trickle down into high school, and before you know it, everyone's drinking their own Kool-Aid way too early. Like I said, man, I was a nobody from a nothing town who had to walk onto the University of Missouri and scrape and claw my way for 5 years at Mizzou to become an All-American, and then 12 years in mixed martial arts to finally become a household name. And I'm so thankful for that slow boil, that slow rise, because it can happen very, very quickly, right? But the hard way, the long way is the better way. You know, it always adds more layers to your human. It always adds more layers to the armor for the battles that will eventually come, the valleys that will eventually be there. And it'll always keep you more and more humble, because you're more, even after you get 15 years in down that long road, you remember more of where you started from. I remember me at 14 years old walking into Northwest High School for the first time for Bob and Ron Wilhelm to wrestle, and I had just started wrestling and I didn't really feel like I deserved to be there. And I remember the first time I walked on to Mizzou campus. I was just almost finished my book recently, and I recall this story of, we were in this gray minivan and my parents dropping me off at Mizzou for the first time, and remembering the fear, like the crippling paralysis fear that I had when I was watching these guys walk into Baker Park dorm room that is no longer there. It got torn down because it was an old dorm, and watching these state champs walk in. There's Marcus Hayne from Missouri. There's Joey Garrity from Illinois. There's Chris Potter from Illinois. There's Andrew Sherry from Pennsylvania, Ryan Williams from California, and all these guys were state champs. Like, all these guys were highly recruited and on scholarships, and some of them blue chip recruits that all these other big schools wanted, but somehow Mizzou won the race of getting these guys to come over, and won them to come onto the team. And here I was walking in and nobody knew who I was, that fear. And I will never, ever forget that crippling fear of how scared I was of realizing that maybe I should have just taken a scholarship to a smaller school at Missouri Baptist or Lindenwood. But something in me said to go walk on and do what everybody said that you couldn't do. And I remember making that decision as an 18-year-old, and it's helped me so many times in my life, where I'm now 39, and I say, well, if the 18-year-old me had the courage and the gall and the tenacity, the self-belief, the faith to make that decision when all signs pointed towards me not making a smart decision, how am I not going to do it at 25? How am I not going to do it at 30? How am I not going to do it at 35, 39? How am I not going to do it for the rest of my life? And that shaped me big time, you know, by realizing where I came from in the humble beginnings.
So let's talk a little bit about your family, because you said these are the people that drive you. They're your why. I've heard multiple times about the story of meeting your wife, and you talked about investing in long-term and how relationships don't necessarily happen overnight. Can you give maybe the Cliff Notes, because it's just such a great story. Can you give the Cliff Notes version of how you met your wife?
Yeah, I love it. You want to talk about patience, or you want to talk about? I mean, it's kind of a funny. It's awesome, but it's also a little bit funny. There's a little bit of stalker sprinkled in there. I swear I wasn't a stalker. It wasn't crazy, but yeah, it was between my freshman and sophomore year in college. I chipped my tooth, one of these front teeth, in wrestling. And the University of Missouri was going to pay for it because it happened in wrestling. So they sent me to this doctor, or this dentist named Dr. Willett. And I was sitting in his office and I saw these pictures of his family, because I knew I had seen him before, so I knew what he looked like. And I thought, well, there's his wife and there's his son, and who is that gorgeous little brunette with brown eyes? I fell in love.
Picture on the wall.
I fell in love with this girl in this picture on the wall. And I thought to myself in that moment, I'll never forget, I said, well, if she is anything like him, because I knew his reputation around town, I knew how many people loved him and the leader that he was and the servant that he was in this community in Columbia, Missouri. I thought, if she is anything like him, I want to marry that girl. And of course, I didn't say anything that day while he was working on my mouth and fixing my tooth and doing all that stuff. But then the next year, I started going to a Bible study with a bunch of people who knew her, and they kept talking about this Bree Willett girl. Her name got brought up every other week or something. Someone would somehow say something about Bree or Bree Willett or what she was doing. And I was like, man, that's that girl, man. And of course, the power of Facebook, I was able to look her up and see her and kind of watch her from afar a little bit. Like, I don't know what it is, but there's something about this girl. I had been to her house before because her dad threw a birthday party. She wasn't there, but I remember sitting on the back deck, and he's got this beautiful pond back there. And I remember thinking to myself, someday I'm going to marry this girl and I'm going to be fishing on that pond. And a couple of years later, I finally Facebook friended her, which thank God I was friends with some mutual friends. And then finally, a couple of years later, I sent her a Facebook message, and then she kind of responded, but she would take like a month or two to respond. And then she was applying to critical care residencies at the University of Missouri. So she deactivated her personal Facebook account, gave me her email. So I emailed her right away. She waited a month or two to respond. Emailed her right away, a month or two to respond. Finally, 2 years of emailing and Facebook.
A month or two?
Yeah, she would wait a long time. And she wasn't necessarily like playing games or anything. She just wasn't really interested. She was married to medicine. She wasn't worried about dating a guy. And worked out perfectly for me because she's such an independent woman, a career woman focused on herself and her goals and all the schooling that she did and the passion that she has for medicine. And that was very attractive to me. And because my mom worked numerous jobs, my dad worked his tail off. So like that was very attractive to me. And in that time in life, her kind of stringing me along was good for me too, because I was intrigued by her, kind of infatuated by her, but I never met her before. And then she finally said yes to a coffee date with me at Caldy's Coffee on January 24th of 2013. And we have been together ever since.
I heard you made a couple of critical errors though when you ordered coffee.
I did. So if you know my wife Bree at all, she is like, it takes a strong man to be married to Bree Chandler, right? Because she's like, hey, I am my own person. You are your own person. I got my goals. You got your goals. We are together. We are equally yoked. We are one. We are one now in a marriage union under God. But like, I've got my stuff and you got your stuff, and you gotta be a confident individual. And I am. But in that moment, it's really funny because we ordered coffee and I was like, of course you go first. She ordered a vanilla breve latte, and I never had a vanilla breve latte in my entire life.
That wasn't your average daily drink?
No, it was not. But I could tell you one thing: I didn't care about the coffee. I just wanted it. I was like, I can't wait to just get done with this coffee ordering thing, so we can sit down and I can look you in the eyes and freaking fall in love with you and make you fall in love with me. So I was just like, yeah, I'll have the same thing. So she's like, oh my gosh, this guy doesn't think for himself, doesn't have a backbone. He just ordered the exact same thing that I asked or ordered. And then the other person, the person at the cash register was like, okay, what's the name for your order? And I was like, Bree. Boom. It's like mistake number 2. Bree is like, okay, I'm from this town. I work in the ER at this town. There's probably a doctor or nurses or somebody who I know here. And now he just told this person, Bree, now someone's going to yell Bree over the loudspeaker. And everyone's, going to know I'm here on a date with this guy. I don't even know anything about him. So made 2 critical errors right away, but it kind of laid the foundation for her to sit there and be like, wow, I didn't like this at first, but we had some really good conversations, and it was really cool because she said it was the first time that I ever had a date where I was like, oh, I really hope he calls me back. Because the funny thing is, I had practice at 3:00. I had to be there at 3 because I was coaching, I was going to train with the team at the time. And so when we set the date, I think she set it for like 1:45 or 2:00, which I needed to be done by 2:45. So she gave us a very short amount of time, typical Bree fashion. Like, hey, if I don't like this dude, I'm going to make it as short as possible so I can get in and get out. And it turns out that she was like, well, shoot, he's got to go. I hope he calls me back. And then we've literally been together ever since.
How long have you been married now?
It was 10 years in September.
Wow, congrats.
So, but we were only, I mean, I knew already. I knew from the moment she walked in, and I couldn't see her because it was a beautiful sunny January day and it had these big windows. I just saw her silhouette, but even just seeing her silhouette, I was like, there's my wife. Like my wife is walking toward me right now, because naturally I was early. I was probably 30 minutes early, like scoping the place out, checking everything out, making sure it was good. But, and we were only engaged for 11 months. We got engaged March of the following year, and then married in September of the following year.
She your best friend?
Best friend, man. It's crazy. Like, yeah, she is. And it's funny too, because we are in a season right now. I cried yesterday just because we're in a very chaotic season right now. We got our 2 boys, and they just got off of school, and they're Hap's doing multiple sports camps, and Ace is doing sports camps. And we have this now 10-week-old at home who's doing 10-week-old things, and you can't take your eyes off of her. And Bree's on maternity leave, but still working a couple days a week and doing trainings for Allergan and doing all this stuff. And I've got my stuff. I just got done telling you in the elevator, I try not to work on the weekends. I try not to do weekend trips so I can be home with the family, but so I do them during the week. But it just so happens like 6 weekends in a row, I'm gone for 2, 3, or 4 days every week. And they're obligations that I have to do, and not have to do, want to do, get to do. I'm very fortunate for them, but they just seem to happen on weekends. And we're in such a chaotic moment right now. And I had to tell her yesterday, I was like, just so you know, like, it is chaotic right now. This is probably the craziest life has ever been for us, but I just want you to know, I know it doesn't feel like it sometimes because we're 2 ships passing in the night, or it's not about how are you, or I love you, or let's go deeper with our relationship. It's about, let's get this thing done. Let's take care of this. Let's schedule this. Let's schedule that. What nanny's going to help us here? Who's going to cover this? It's all transactional because it's so, we're trying to run this thing that we call our family right now, and also spend time and deal with the guilt that we feel of working. And I just had to tell her yesterday, I was like, just so you know, like, I will always, always, always love you, be your biggest fan, always choose you. And I know it doesn't feel like that right now because I'm choosing work, or I got to choose the kids, or you got to choose the kids, or you got to choose your work. But you got to pull yourself out of it and look at it from this 30,000 foot view of, man, I've got my person, my human, and man, it's not always perfect and it's not always easy, but I've got my partner in crime, my person who she has stood by me through all the wins and all the losses, all these years, and it's been really awesome.
So important, man. You know, we were preparing for this show. My wife, who works with me, who's executive producer for the show, she spent a lot of time with me, and she's like, it's just amazing how much he loves his family. She's like, you got to spend time on it because it's just clearly that's what drives him. I could even see it now in your eyes when you talk about your wife, like how much you love her, and it's
especially right impressive. Now, because it's you know, as a man or as a woman, obviously I don't know what it feels like to be a woman, a mother, a wife, or whatever, but I can speak from my perspective. You just feel like you're failing, right? The conundrum between, what do I do? What am I supposed to do? I could have spent more time with the family. I could have been less hard on my son about this, or I could have been more thoughtful here. I could have put in more effort or been more attentive to details, right? And you got to give yourself credit and show yourself grace, because you're going to feel like you're failing all the time whenever, as businesses get bigger and the career gets bigger and more children are added, and you got this relationship that's the most important thing in the world. The most important thing that I can give my children is a great relationship with their mother. You know, so you're kind of going through it all, and it's man, it's beautiful and chaotic right now. But I think it's one of those times where, once again, I will have the perspective of looking back and saying, babe, remember that time when we just added a third child, and this was happening and that was happening. You're thinking about doing this, and we never thought you would do this, but you're going this way with your career, and I'm going this way with my career. And remember that time? Like, think about the bonds that we're building.
It's so important, man. And again, as I'm listening to you, you're 10 years younger than me, but it's impressive that you've learned a lot of these lessons a lot faster than I did. Because just like you said, I mean, and the other thing is, it sounds like, and you said it, you and your wife are on equal playing fields. You're doing different things, but you're communicating, you're there. And I think, you know, this is my second marriage. I married my best friend. I got married the first time when I was 19. So you're a much different person later on down the line. But I learned a lot from that. And I was one of those people who said, Mike, man, I'm never going to work with my wife. I can't do that. But what I've realized over the last, we've been married going on 4 years now, it's probably the best decision that I could have made, because we're equal. She's there. She understands what I'm going through. There's the communication to where it's very tempting, especially when you have the means to say, okay, you go work, I'll go work, or you stay home, take care of the kids. You separate, do your own things, and then you meet back up to check in. It just doesn't really work, man.
Yeah. And we're going through some interesting prospects right now of working together on a couple different things that we're doing, which is really cool. A couple of these. What's really, really cool too is we talk about reputation, right? And my wife's reputation in her industry is just top notch. Everybody loves her, and she's competent, and she is a ass kicker. And then it's really funny. I have two really, really awesome, huge business opportunities right now that have nothing to do with Michael Chandler or my fighting or my anything. They were things that her reputation and her competence brought both of us, you know. So it's just really cool to see. And both of those things we would be business partners on, which is really cool. And I think we've always been business partners on different things, because she's always been like the greatest support system that I've ever had. And I try to be the greatest support system that she's ever had. I never want to stop her from doing anything. I never want to put limits on her. Part of that is self-preservation, because I know her well enough to know she does not want limits put on her, and she wants to. If I want to say no to this, I'm going to say no to it because it feels like the right thing to do. I don't want my husband to tell me that I can't do it, right? So I've always said, hey, I can make $1 billion my next fight, and she would still work because she wants to work. She likes to work. She enjoys working. She enjoys the accomplishment. She enjoys the numbers. Like she looks at her numbers in her spreadsheets of how much money she brought in, you know, the day. The previous day, like that's just how she's wired, and she loves it. Part of it's that her dad, shout out to Dr. Kent Willett. You know, I met her on a picture at his office being a dentist running his own dental practice. She watched her dad build a successful business. So I think that's part of it. She's very much like her dad. And I'm very thankful for that. But so we're very equally yoked, which of course it brings about certain tensions or certain moments where we got to work through some things, but all in all, it's just an absolute awesome partnership, man.
Do you guys have any rules about fighting? Like you hear some people say, don't go to bed angry at each other. What rules do you guys have?
You know, we don't have that one. What I realize about myself is, you know, I grew up in a home where there was quite a bit of tension / like, you know, fighting here and there. Mom and dad would fight or whatever. So like, I think my biggest fear was, well, shoot, like I don't want to ever be in a fight. I don't want to ever be in an argument with my wife. I don't want to ever be in a fight. I never want to be how dad was to mom or mom was to dad, because that's how I was. And it wasn't ever bad. It wasn't ever violent, or it wasn't ever anything. It was just disagreements and there was tension, right? And so I which is really funny that I ended up fighting in a cage for a living for so long, and I look like a psychopath in there, and I'm like blood running down my face, and I look like a freaking psychopath because I'm one of the most non-confrontational people ever. I do not like to have disagreements, but especially the most important relationship was with my wife, and realizing that it's okay to disagree on things. It's okay to have a little bit of tension. It's okay to sometimes be on the different pages than each other. It's okay to do that. And it's okay to sometimes not try to fix everything, because I'm a guy who like wants to fix it. If we get into a disagreement or we are not on the same page about something, or quote unquote get into a fight, it's like, well, hey, let me fix it. I got to fix it. I got to find a way to fix it. Hey, let's talk about it. And she's like, hey, just stop. Just leave me alone. Give me a second. What's that song by, is it Jody Messina? I just want to be mad for a while. Or whatever it is. I think that's who it was. But it's like, let me just be mad for a second and let's come back together. And it's not like it's going to be, you know, weeks or days or months or hours. It's just going to be, we'll figure it out, but just stop. Just leave me alone. I'm like, okay. So I've had to like learn that as well. Right. But no, so I mean, we don't even have the rule of, you know, don't go to bed angry necessarily, but it's always ends up happening, you know, not going to bed angry. But more than anything for me, I just need to give her space sometimes, and we can come back, and cooler heads always prevail. Yeah,
we have a lot in common, man. I think maybe it's just guys, we want to fix things and move on to the next thing and get it done. And I think that's maybe just women need a little bit more time to think it through. And so let's talk about your kids. So you've got Hap as the oldest, and you got Ace, and you just Drew's your daughter's 10 weeks. I know your first two you adopted, and you talk about your wife always wanted to adopt. Tell me the thought process behind that.
Yeah, she always wanted to adopt. It wasn't something that I necessarily thought of much, really, but which is really funny because years later, or actually, I think when I first told my mom and dad that, you know, me and Bree were going to adopt, they were like, "Oh yeah, well, you mentioned that when you were a kid. You talked about adopting a child." I was like, "Did I really? I never thought I ever said that in my entire life," but they said that I did. But Bree always wanted to adopt since she was a teenager. You know, she always just thought, hey, if someday, if I marry a great man and we end up in a great relationship, because, you know, she wasn't 100% sure about the whole relationship marriage thing forever, because she wasn't exactly your daughter or girl who was like playing with Barbies and Barbie and Ken were getting married, and she was planning out her wedding by the time she was 10 years old, and fairy tales and princesses and white knight in shining armor, right? She was a kind of a workhorse athlete, you know, broke a girl's nose with her elbow in basketball, a little bit rough around the edges, a little bit of a tomboy. Why do I got to wear this dress? I'd rather wear these sweatpants and these Samba shoes or whatever. But she always knew that she wanted to adopt. Like someday if I meet a man and we get married, I want to adopt. And we, like I said, we weren't together for very long before I proposed. So it was probably within the first 6 months of us being together. We were just in love, and it was like a foregone conclusion that we were going to get married. And we were in San Diego by Balboa Park, laying at a dog park where we used to watch the airplanes fly over and land, but we were at this cool dog park where we'd watch people play with their dogs and stuff. And we started talking about, she's like, you know, ever since I was a teenager, I always wanted to adopt. And obviously, of course, I always make the joke, like tongue in cheek. Well, I would have told her anything to marry her, because I wanted to marry her so bad. But I truly was on board. I was like, hey, to me, I've never really thought about, I just knew I wanted to have a family. Right. And then we kind of made that decision that day, or at least I told her, hey, I'm on board with this. Like, sounds good to me. However we make a family, we'll make a family. And then, yeah, we got married, and then we're newlyweds for a little while. And then a couple of years later, we were like, hey, she's like, I really feel like God's put it on my heart. I think it's time to really start talking about adopting. And we made the decision and went through the process, and it was God's perfect timing, because it took a little bit longer than expected. If anybody's gone through the adoption process, it is 1,000 pages of paperwork and background checks, financial background checks, health background checks, FBI background checks, and all these different things, which there should be some barriers to entry, obviously, for the adoption process, but it's a long process. And it also took me a second. I was in a training camp after training camp, and I didn't 100% feel right about it, so I kind of delayed it a little bit and sought wise counsel and prayed about it a lot, and then finally was on board. And then we got approved for adoption. I forget what day it was, but it was like 1:40 p.m. We got an email saying, congratulations, you are now eligible to adopt. And at 1:46 p.m., right after, we got a phone call. Hey, congratulations, you're eligible. By the way, I think we have your son. Wow. I think we found your son, right? And I always make the joke, in wrestling terms, it was a 6-minute match, which is like a six minute match is what a wrestling match is. And then a couple days later, we were down in Dallas, and a couple days after that, we had our baby.
So I've never gone through the adoption process. So when you go through the adoption process, do you put out there what age, where they came from, background? What did that look like? Was there something specific you were looking for, age of the child? Or?
You can always have your preferences. And the one thing, because me and Bree talk to a lot of people about adoption and all these all the different process, because it really is a very intimidating space when it comes to, okay, I want to adopt, but what is the process? Which way do I go? Do I go with an adoption agency? Do I go with an adoption consulting company? Do I go with, how do I get more information about it all, right? And you can have your preferences, age, gender, nationality, race, and all those different things. Are you okay with all these different preferences? Are you okay with a little bit of medical stuff going on with the child, or whatever it may be? Is it foster care? Is it a brand newborn? Is it 0 to 6 months? Is it all these different preferences? And the one thing that I always say is, make sure that you never listen to the enemy to make you feel bad about having your preferences, right? Because you would have, if all of us in this room were like, hey, we're definitely adopted, we might all have different preferences, and the preferences that you have is exactly the way that God wants to build your family, and the way that we have our preferences is exactly the way God wants to build our family. And making sure the enemy doesn't get in and say, well, you should just be open to everything, right? So you go through the process, and then it fit perfectly.
And so you adopted Hap.
Yep.
How much later was it when you adopted Ace?
Man, it was, the first, now that we've had 3 children, you're like, okay, was it a harder transition from just us to 1, or us with 1 to 2, or 2 to 3, right? We kind of went through that, I guess the adjustment of having a child and us both working, and me moving to Nashville, and we're doing all this stuff and opening up a gym and all this different stuff with my career and her career. So it was almost 5 years. So it was quite a while, because there was a while there where we were like, man, we probably want to expand the family, but we're not 100% sure. And just, we prayed about it and kept kind of seeing how we felt about it. And it never really felt right until a couple of years later. We're like, I think we want to do this again. And then Ace came along.
And now Drew, I believe, is your biological daughter, right?
Yep.
So what was you went from the transition of adopting? Was this something you just felt like, hey, we want to have a biological daughter, or what was the thought process behind that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thought process was I wanted to try for a daughter. Wanted to see if I can try for a daughter. It's one of those things where you kind of get on the other side of it, and you're just like, you're kind of just going by the discernment of what you feel, right? And it's been, it's beautiful. It's different. Holding my daughter for the first time was definitely different. I just felt it right away. And Bree's like, oh yeah, this is different, huh? Like I held her for the first time, and I was just like, she feels a little bit more fragile, or like she needs a little bit more protection, right? And man, we're still very early in the process right now. She's just, sleeping and pooping and, getting her diaper changed and not doing a ton. But man, it's been fun. And watching my 2 boys, because you always think about the transition where it's like, okay, well, Ace has been the baby, and he's been treated like the baby, and he knows he's the baby, a boss baby, we call him, to, okay, shoot, you're not the baby anymore. How's this dude going to handle it? Because he's a little rough around the edges. He's a little bit of he's got the hustle gene, I call it. He's just always moving, running and throwing and jumping and flipping and all kinds of stuff. I'm like, we got be careful he doesn't be like, hey, who's this girl think she is? I'm the baby, right? But he's been so sweet. And Hap is like your perfect typical firstborn, where he's just like, he wants to do good, similar to me. Like I wanted to do good, I wanted to do right because I was the firstborn. I was in charge of the kids because I was the oldest, type of thing. Hap is like that. So obviously he's helpful, he's sweet. And then Ace has exceeded our expectations too. Even at 3, he's just like taking care of her, putting her passy back in her mouth and wanting to help out with things, going to grab her this, going to grab her that, giving her his lovey and all these different things. So it's been really, really cool, man. And having kids is the most beautiful / chaotic, scary thing in the world. But because it's so scary and because the stakes are so high and because, as men, it's like we always wanted to be superheroes when we were kids, right? Playing Power Rangers or Transformers or Batman, Robin, Cowboys and Indians, whatever it was. We always wanted to be a superhero, and then we get the opportunity to be a superhero to our children, and making sure that we don't take that lightly and realizing that these heartbeats are mine and I am in charge of them. I'm in charge of everything that happens to them, everything that happens for them, and really just taking it very seriously.
What's your biggest worry as a dad?
My biggest worry as a dad, I think, is just passing on my wounds that I haven't dealt with, that are non-existent, that should be non-existent in my family, that I have to really keep a handle on, right? Even for me, having a concept of time too, right? It's like we just talked about earlier. My son is at a basketball camp right now, right? Playing basketball, but he's 8 years old playing a basketball. I don't remember how I was as an athlete, how on time I was, how much I hustled, how hard I worked, how great I was at these certain things. I only remember myself as a high schooler, barely as a high schooler, and as a college athlete. So making sure I don't compare my college athlete self to my 6-year-old, my 8-year-old, my 3-year-old, right? Where it's just like, and enjoying the process. I was actually thinking about this on the way here, and I don't normally do this, but I was like, I felt God just like kind of speaking to me, where it's like, let's talk about curiosity, right? Let's talk about imagination, because I'm such a get the job done kind of guy, and I'm so thankful for it, man, because I've built my platform and I've built this life, and we have what we have because I'm a get the job done kind of guy. But when we're walking through the mall and we're trying to get to where we're going, wherever we're going, my son Hap is looking around and he's never seen a Jamba Juice before, and he's what is that long word right there, or why is that color like that? And he's looking at architecture, and he's curious and he's imaginative, and this is the first time that he's seen this thing, and I've walked past it 16 million times in my life. So I'm like, let's go, buddy. We got to get to the job. We got to get to the thing. We got to get the job done. So we as parents, we can stifle that curiosity and stifle that imagination, because my head is always in front of me and I'm always leaning forward, getting to where I'm going as fast as I possibly can. Whereas he and my son Ace and my daughter Drew, when she gets of age to walk and stuff, they're going to walk around and it's going to be a lot slower than us because they're looking and they're taking everything in. They are taking in all of the beauty that God has created around them and that man has created around them. So just trying to slow down and enjoy the process. I think that's the biggest fear. And once again, you hear the older guys, right, when they're like, hey man, enjoy it because it goes real fast, right?
Blink of an eye.
Yeah,
right?
Blink of an eye, man. So it's just like, it's a process to try to, because you never really realize it till you get to your destination and get done and get back in the car seat. You're sitting there and you're driving, you're like, gosh dang, I just rushed that entire process. And did it really matter if we got there 10 minutes early? Did it really matter if we got there? And I want to teach them they have to be on time. We're never late to anything, but I don't have to be 20 minutes early and do a dynamic warm up and a stretch and do all this stuff like I always do. Like as an athlete, I'm conditioned to like, what time did I get here? What time did I call you today? Right? 20 minutes before I was scheduled to be here, right? Because that's just how I'm wired. I want to get there early because I've always got my bag and I've got my workout equipment and I've got my gear and I got to get changed and I got to get ready. Then I got to warm up. Then I got to stretch and then I got to do whatever. If you're on time, you're late. If you're not 10 minutes early, you're right on time, right? So making sure that those wounds and how I'm dialed in on things don't necessarily cross over to a parenting style that is less than full of grace and full of love and full of fun and full of curiosity and full of imagination,
And we talked about this a little bit before, but money, obviously now you and your wife have a certain amount of means. What is money today doing for you, for Hap and Ace and Drew? And what are you trying to accomplish with it that you didn't have as a kid? Like what tangible things are you doing today that you think is going to benefit them?
I think the biggest thing is options and choices, I say this because we made a move to a new house, or we did something else where we thought like, well, how are people going to view this, right? It's like we sit here and say, well, you're a mature, successful, standing 10 toes down. I don't care what people think. We say that, but we always are thinking like, okay, well, how is this going to be perceived by people, right? And I had that thought one day. I was like, well, people without options or people without choices are always going to criticize people with options and choices. If I have the ability and the means to make this choice right now, I'm going to make this choice because it's the right thing for my family. So I think it's options and choices, opportunities to do things that I never had. Like I said, I just brought up this Tyler guy at Belmont. He was one of the top 3-point shooters in all of NCAA Division I last year, right? So my son is around guys like that, guys that are on the Belmont squad, guys that are starters at Brentwood Academy and Lipscomb Academy and all these different little sports camps that he's going to. And I don't care if he plays sports and sticks it out, gets a scholarship, goes to the pros, whatever it is, it doesn't matter to me. It's more about what he's learning through the process, but also being around other high functioning individuals. Like being around, which is funny. I actually texted Tyler today. He's like, Hap. So I know they've already interacted. He's like, Hap wins the best jersey. Today's jersey day. It says walk on his jersey and it's got Hap on the back. So I know he's interacting with them, but like I wasn't around a college athlete till I went to college.
You started wrestling pretty late also, right?
I started wrestling as in high school.
Well, yeah.
Basically, right? And I didn't see a college wrestling match till my senior year of high school, right after my senior year of high school at Big 12s at the University of Missouri, which coincidentally ended up being where I went and walked on. But just giving them opportunities and experiences earlier than I got. And once again, I love my road. I love my background. I love my foundation and how I got to where I am. But I feel like to whom much is given, much is required, right? And I am required to give them more than I had, and I am required to open their mind up to more than what is possible, right? If I was told that I shouldn't leave those county lines, I shouldn't go outside those county lines for fear of failure, and that's the worst thing that can happen, I want my children to believe they can travel the entire world. If my son right now, who Hap loves to draw things, right? I don't know if you know this, but the tallest building in the world is the Burj Khalifa. That's what he looked up, and he loves buildings and architecture, right? And he takes this big piece of paper and he turns it sideways so you can go through both of them, and he builds this big old tower, and he puts 2 little dots down in the bottom left-hand corner, and he says, "Hey, Dad, you know what those 2 dots are? That's Mount Everest right there, and that's the Burj Khalifa. Look how much bigger my building is than the Burj Khalifa, the biggest building on the planet, and Mount Everest, the biggest mountain on the planet, one of the biggest mountains on the planet, right? And he's got that imagination. I want him to believe that is possible. Mm-hmm. You and I both know the actual scale of how big that is. There's no way that building is going to be bigger than that Burj Khalifa. If that's the Burj Khalifa to scale, there's no way you can build that, because that spire, which the top of the building is called a spire, I didn't know that till the last couple months since he's doing all this research, would basically almost be touching the moon if you really did like the scale of it, right? It's not possible. It's too big, but I want him to believe that is big, because I think in the environment that I grew up, that I would have been told that was impossible. I would have been told that is not realistic. I would have been told that there's no way that could be attained. So I by no means am doing it perfectly. I by no means do it right every day, and I have my moments, but ultimately I am required to open their mind up to things.
So important, man. And okay, so I think it's clear, like, and I was, questioning this, like, this guy, again, I said, seems so perfect, all these things, but I feel like, it's just, you're just, again, like my wife said, when you talk about your parent, your family, your eyes light up. When you talk about God, your eyes light up, and it's just, you could feel the type of person you are, and I think it's clear why you're having success. But this show's about really trying to give other people actionable ideas and roadmaps and whatever that may be, for them to, first let them know, hey, we believe in you. You can do this. All this shit that you're being told that you can't, get that out the window. This is what you're trying to instill in your kids. So if you're telling your kids this, the information that we're giving them is obviously good information. But let's talk about, so you went from Bellator, you went to the UFC. Let's talk about the financial decision behind that. And you're a guy, like I say, always work right to left, start with the end in mind. I tell people I work with a lot of startups in terms of building businesses, and they're always like shocked to say, like, Rob, why are you asking me who I'm going to exit to, why I'm going to sell this? I said, it's really important, because if we're building a business to go public, or we're building a business to sell to private equity versus selling to your kids, it's going to be a way different outcome. And so we're going to start from day one doing that different. And so now you're making this transition that all entrepreneurs do. And, I'm not going to ask you the question when you're going to retire, but you're 39 years old. It's on your mind. And I'm sure at some point in time, you're closer to the end of your career than you are the beginning. And I think, which is why you're starting to get involved with all these different investments. And I believe you'll probably be way more successful as an entrepreneur than you've even been in the UFC, because you got a much longer runway with it.
Yeah. And I've heard that from a lot of very high functioning, successful individuals, which is really, really cool to hear, and making sure I stay humble and realize, well, it doesn't matter if I have all this potential, I still have to have the action behind it. Right. And I think, I know I'm closer to the end than I am the beginning. Obviously, I still got a couple fights left in me, still got a little bit of tread left on the tires. Still, one of the most desired, sought after guys to watch on a pay-per-view, because I think, once again, it's not always about the result. It's about how you make people feel, right? And I think you're going to be hard pressed to find a guy who, when that octagon door closes on any given Saturday night on an arena somewhere on pay-per-view, that is going to pour more passion into the fight than I do. Might not always win, but I'm going to pour my full self into it, right? And I think that's what I've always done in everything that I do. Anything worth doing is worth doing excellently, right? So I think the last couple of years, I've really been taking stock in and looking at what I want to do next, and who I want to do it with. Like I talk about the relationship capital. I've spent all these years building these relationships, never really capitalizing on them until it's really time. But now, starting over these last couple of years, saying, hey, let's really start having a conversation of what life after fighting looks like. And it's tough too when you hear like Dana White is he obviously runs the UFC, the president, CEO. He always talks about, well, hey, if a guy's ever talking about retiring, it's probably smart for him to retire, because you can't be one foot in, 1 foot out. And while I agree with almost everything that Dana says from a business standpoint, right, I think I've always looked at it differently. I've always looked at it like I'm an entrepreneur whose shiny object is this fighting thing. And I pour myself fully into the fighting thing, but it's just another way to get me closer to the end goal of being a business owner, being on a platform, monetizing my voice and the impact that I can make through financial decisions, business decisions, and also offering my wisdom. So just, I want to be in business. I want to be, really sink my teeth into something, while also being on a platform to reach as many people as possible, be in front of the camera, be on a microphone, realizing that I have this auditory gift and this experience that I can vocalize and verbalize my experiences in a way and from a perspective that not a lot of people have. And I don't take that lightly. And it's going to be a lot of fun, man. Mm-hmm. We'll see. But I do believe, even if you look at the list of, when did Warren Buffett become a billionaire? When did Mark Zuckerberg become a billionaire? I think, obviously Zuck became a billionaire earlier than everybody, but most of them, not that I'm saying I'm going to be a billionaire, right? But I'm not trying to put business limits on it, but it's like, in that 40, 50, 60 year range, it's like, once again, with this get rich quick mentality that we have, you got these 25-year-olds thinking they should be worth 200 million because this next influencer YouTuber did, because Mr. Beast is worth all this money. It's like, well, he's an anomaly. He should be something to shoot for, but not to measure yourself against every day,
Right. Yeah. And I think one thing you said is that you always looked yourself as an entrepreneur, but sports was kind of this shiny object to attract attention to yourself. And I think that's a great way to look at it. I've said I've spent all my career working with primarily entrepreneurs, athletes, corporate executives, but I said it's really entrepreneurs, because all the athletes want to become entrepreneurs at one point in time, and most of them have a very short career. And I think, again, when I can get to them early enough, I'm talking about that business that they're building and getting them to think life after sports, because you don't know how long it's going to be, especially in a sport like yours. And I think, like you also said, is it's very smart to think about how do I monetize this moment today? How do I monetize my celebrity today? How do I monetize this success today? Because the truth is, Michael, is you're always going to be a brand. People are going to think about you all the time in terms of UFC, but it's going to continue to diminish year after year after year. But the money that you can make doesn't have to, right? But if you start thinking about that early enough and capitalizing these opportunities when you're in this space right now, because Michael Chandler could pick up the phone and a lot of people are going to listen to him today. And I know this from guys who were first round draft picks, NBA, but 10 years later, 20 years later, that opportunity isn't there. So I would tell you, start asking for those favors right now. Start asking for those things now.
Yeah, no, it's smart. And every time I have these kinds of conversations, it is, once again, like I said, the enemy does a great job of holding you back, because the enemy, it doesn't seem like the enemy knows you just as well as God knows you, because he knows which way to, he knows which way to tinker things, which things to put in your path, which things to pull out of your path, which decisions for you to make to really make yourself play small, right? But then you have these moments where it's like, you know what, you're right. And anybody who's listening right now, take it from me, because, we're all going to struggle with that, like whether it's the deservedness, the imposter syndrome, the who am I to ask for this, right? But as long as your heart is pure, because man, I've had some people who, I don't like to throw around the word deserve, right? Because a lot of people think they deserve way more than they actually do. And a lot of people who deserve more don't believe they deserve enough, right? But I've had some people who don't necessarily deserve to have what I have given them from a connection standpoint or a help standpoint or whatever that I have. And they were probably like, wow, I never thought that he would say yes to that, or I never thought that he would do this, right? And you just never quite know, right? The best thing you can do is make the best decision you can with the information that you have. And like I said, this is another reminder that I need to ask for more, especially when I know it's for the greater good of the world, right? If I always look at it like, man, the more successful I become, it's hopefully another decent guy who's got more than enough to be able to continue to spin the world in the right direction.
Well, and I always say that's really the hallmark. What I've seen is great entrepreneurs, right? And what you're saying is you want to. I'm not saying you have enough money. We always want to be better looking, better. Maybe not you in better shape, but you always want more. But I feel like the good entrepreneurs don't only want more for themselves, but they want it for other people. And I know when I see my employees buy their first home or do like that, is just so rewarding and gratifying. And so that's one of the other things about wealth. Yeah, there's altruism out there, but there's the people that are listening to the show, that people that need a chance, an opportunity in business to succeed. And creating jobs, I think, is one of the greatest altruism you can give, because that spread and magnifies so much longer. So being an entrepreneur, I think, is a very high calling if you look at it that way. And if you go into it that way, what I've seen is you'll be way more successful versus how do I make a bunch of money and buy a house for Rob or buy another house for Michael, because all that stuff ends.
Yeah, well, and especially too from the athlete mindset too. It's like it's very transactional, right? I mean, I can tell you, I don't get paid unless I step into the octagon and fight. But when I step into the octagon and fight, I get paid and I get paid well, right? But if I want an NFL contract, I don't get paid unless I step onto the field and play, right? Like it's very transactional. I perform a service, I get paid for the service, right? Whereas building a business, being an entrepreneur, maybe the numbers aren't where they need to go. Maybe you're in the red because you spent more money on marketing, but spending more money on marketing and investing in this certain bucket right here is going to make us more money 2 months down the road, 3 months down the road. And then also, I mean, I think one of the biggest things for me, candidly too, is being in charge of things, right? Like there is nobody on the Mizzou wrestling team back in the day, and now in every gym that I've been in, that would not do the job harder and with more attention to detail, go longer than I need to, show up on time, do it right for my coaches, right? But the coaches tell me what to do, and then I go execute. I will run through that brick wall if you tell me to, coach. I'll do it 1,000 times if you want me to do it, coach. I'll do it, right? And I've had that mentality since I was 14. Now, in the entrepreneurial business space, if it's like, well, if I'm in charge, I need to make sure that I've got somebody who can actually execute the vision, because if I'm the visionary or I've got these ideas, I've got to have somebody who can execute those things, right? So that's been kind of the transition for me as well. Having a coach, has been awesome for me, because I've had a coach in every single thing that I've done as an athlete. But as I transition into the business side of things, I got to have a real important number 2 person who can help actually take the vision, and execute the actual plan.
But like you said, everything that you've done up to now, everything you've done in sports, as they say, as you do one thing is how you do everything. And that's why I love working with top performing athletes, because they get what it takes to succeed. Even special ops people from the military. You see Sean, we talked about his success that he's having right now. It's transitioning those talents, that drive, everything that they did, and putting it into the world of business and given a chance. I think those are some of the best entrepreneurs. And you're already hitting on it. The biggest challenge that every entrepreneur I works with is talent. I say I could build billion-dollar businesses all day long if you can get me the people to execute on them. I can show you the financial system, the marketing system, how much to spend. The challenge is, how are you able to attract the talent that's willing to work for you? And that goes back to what I was saying of being that individual that really cares about people. And that's transparent. That's authenticity. We talk about social media. People can read through and sniff phonies these days. And it's the same thing in entrepreneurism. And so, okay, so you're making this transition. You talked about a bunch of different things. We've got a bottle of, let's maybe start there, because I think that's intriguing. Hiatus. I know you made an investment in there. I go to your website, you're there. Let's talk about that. What intrigued you in starting your own tequila?
Yeah, so I actually, I did want to start my own, but that is a very, very long process. So it takes a couple years. You got to go down to the CRT, the Tequila Regulatory Council. You got to go in, you got to get the license. Then you got to do all the branding and start everything. It's a very, very long process before you even start taste testing, right? Then you start taste testing. So I actually had a tequila company approach me a couple years prior to Hiatus, right? And I thought, well, shoot, I only know one person in the spirit space. And they connected me with someone that they said, hey, well, this is not my department. I was more on the marketing side. So we started talking about the spirit space. He said, lo and behold, don't do this one. This is not a great idea. But if you're interested, let's talk about, doing your own maybe. So then after we started talking about doing my own, he was like, you know what, actually I got this idea. There's this really, really awesome, intriguing company based out of New York, started at that point in time 3 years prior. I tried some sample of it, absolutely loved the taste, loved the branding. Like it's exactly what I would have. It's exactly what I would have created. It's sleek. It looks awesome. It tastes really, really good. Obviously, the hallmark of a good tequila is can you sip the Blanco, right? If you can sip the Blanco, then of course you can sip the Reposado, which is aged in barrels, and of course you could sip the Añejo, which is aged even longer in barrels. So as soon as I tasted it, as soon as I saw it, and then as soon as I met the founder, Chris DeSoto, I thought, hey, I wanted to start my own, but instead, do you mind if I just come on board as an equity partner? And we've been doing that now for a couple of years, and it's been a slow grind. We haven't exploded overnight like some of these other ones. The Rock's got his own.
Everyone wants George Clooney numbers.
Mark's got his own, right? Everyone's like, okay, if we do this, we're going to sell it for $1 billion. And it's like, well, this is, I think the obviously the branding, the taste, the way it looks, the founder, but more importantly, like the mission behind it. Like this truly is tequila for tequila people in the way that it was intended to be. If you see these big celebrity tequilas and the Casamigos and these other ones that have gone off and done great things, I think some of the founders of tequila, the way it was supposed to be, would be rolling in their graves because it's lost its tradition, right, of the way that it's supposed to be. So we have a great distillery down in La Cofradia is what is it called, which means brotherhood, down in Tequila. And it was cool when I went there and I visited the distillery, saw the agaves and the hornos, the big ovens and the vats, and watching it get crushed and then go to fermentation and then get distilled and all that stuff. And then it goes to this last room, which is called the rectification room, where other things can be added. You can add flavors, you can add glycerins, you can add emulsifiers, or all these different things. And there was a lady who had been working there since they opened, like 30 something years ago. And she said, you should be very proud of yourself, because this is one of the only tequilas that comes through here that once it goes to that rectification room, nothing else is added. Oh, wow. So it's very pure, it's very good, and it was just something I wanted to do. I was like, my wife and I, we love tequila. Like if it's at least our drink of choice when we do have an adult beverage. And that's how it happened.
We'll have to taste some before you go. I haven't tasted it yet.
There you go. It's good. It's good.
So what else are you doing? What other adventures do you have going on? What are you passionate about? I know you talked about maybe these 2 opportunities with your wife. What are some of the other things that you're looking at doing when you finish?
Yeah, so right now the two opportunities are in the medical space that I can't really talk about because I'm under NDA, which is always a good thing. It means we got some potential if you're under NDA. So that'll be exciting. We've got my fitness app, Walk On Fitness. Obviously, we've got my podcast and my personal brand. I think, part of that is it's not a vanity project, is like trying to build my name and build this big show. And it really is awesome. We just did an episode yesterday, and we hadn't done one in a while, actually, to be honest with you, because I'm kind of sporadic with it. But every time I do it, I realize, man, this is just so awesome. But then it was a coincidence that later on that day, I went and picked up Hap and met this young man who has listened to every single episode, and he gave me some great compliments about how every single episode has helped him big time, right? And you know this because you've done it and you've gotten these interactions. You realize that you've been put on a platform and have this crowd of witnesses to be able to make an impact. So I want to do something on camera that we haven't really sunk my teeth into yet. Part of it is, like I said, being a little bit fearful, for better or worse, to fully commit to something while I'm still fighting, obviously. Some real estate investments, and then really just engaging with some of my friends who have got great opportunities to say, hey, you want to partner on something? If I can pour even half the dedication that I've poured into my sport into this, we can make a lot of money, help a lot of people, and have a lot of fun.
Yeah, I always tell people, I think equity is what changes lives, right? Even if you look at the Fortune 500 CEOs that are out there, Warren Buffett, for example, he's famous for saying that his secretary pays higher taxes than him. And that's true because he takes all his money in equity compensation, which has a tax of 20% versus she's probably making $100,000 a year getting taxed at 30-something%. And for myself, for example, I came from nothing. I was able to build a multi-million-dollar business that I sold to a publicly traded company. Prior to selling that, my net worth was very insignificant compared to that. But I was able to use that sweat equity and grind. And yeah, there's a lot of sacrifice, but over 20 years, build something of value from nothing. And so when people talk to me about, okay, how are you educating people? I can only tell people what I was able to do, right? And I think most people underestimate what they can do in a long period of time, and they probably overestimate what they can do in a short period of time. And I think for most people, building equity is the way to go. However, what I say is you don't have to necessarily build it from scratch. You can buy into it. And there's so many businesses out there now, great businesses, that you don't necessarily need to have hundreds of thousands of dollars, that you're $20,000 or $40,000 that you can buy into, to where if you can get people that are in place already, like we talked about before, that are running these businesses, and then Michael Chandler can come in or Joe can come in and then add some of their own value, it's a much faster trajectory, I think, than people trying to start things from scratch.
Yeah, well, especially, even this, the Hiatus is a perfect example of that. I mean, I knew I wanted to start a tequila company, but I had no idea how to start a tequila company, right? And also, too many times, obviously, there's going to be brand new novel ideas right now, especially with the internet. I mean, think about what AI was. Do we even know what AI was a couple of years ago, right? Some people did, but now it's so mainstream, and it was a kind of a brand new thing, right? So the internet, you can turn on something brand new and novel and something that's completely different. But also, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. If you're passionate about something, if you like a certain product, a certain service, or this idea of even buying aging out businesses where business owners started a business and it's all of a sudden goes to the market because now their son or their daughter, their heirs don't want to take it over and continue on the family business, which I'm sure is painful for certain, founders, right? They're like, dang, man, I started this thing and all this, put my kids through college because I had this landscaping company or this CPA firm or whatever it is. And now they're aging out and getting ready to retire. Somebody else who, I've lived here in Nashville now for 8 years. So I know, some of the vans and service industry, service-based businesses of the vans with the decals that have going across this place. And I know which ones are kind of mainstays inside this community. Imagine if one of those comes up for sale. Now all of a sudden you're an equity owner and you buy a large piece of it to take it to the next level, So just, there's so many different ways. It's really, really hard because it's kind of like once you open your mind up to the fact that there's so many different ways to make money, not going to sit here and say it's easy to make money. There is in certain circumstances, right? But there's so many ways to make money, so many more ways for us to make money today. Like I said, on a napkin here, if we sit here after this show for 2 hours, than our grandparents and our great grandparents had the opportunity to do 50 years ago, you know? So yeah, there's almost so many opportunities to do it that it's really hard to kind of stay focused on which one really truly drives you, right? And I think that's something I wouldn't say I'm struggling with, right? But it's like it's almost as though I do have a plethora of options. So then you're just kind of praying for wisdom, like, hey God, which one's actually going to fuel me? Which one's going to fuel me? What's going to fill the philanthropy service bucket? Which one's going to fill the financial bucket? Which one's going to fill the time bucket? To really build the lifestyle that I envision for my future.
But, you know, I think when you say that, there's so many opportunities today. You can make more money than ever before. I think when you listen to the traditional media out there, it's talking about the opposite. It's talking about AI is coming. It's going to destroy jobs. The rich are going to get richer. The poor are going to get poorer. And that's all true if you believe that's going to be true. And I think that's one of the big challenges why I have my own Wealth Academy and I try to educate people is because I think the traditional education system sets you up for mediocrity. If you look at the teachers and they were like, why aren't we teaching our kids financial literacy? The teachers don't even understand financial literacy themselves. And it's crazy to me because if you look at just basic finance, a lot of the things you and I learned in college, you know, my daughter was doing certain things in 8th or 9th grade mathematically that are way more difficult than basic finance, but we're still not teaching them those skills. And I believe that, you know, I talk about entrepreneurs today. It's really about you need a small team of all-stars with all-star processes, and then you're going to use technology and AI to run somewhere in the middle. So big billion-dollar companies aren't going to be thousands of people anymore. But also, if you look at where media is going and where advertisers are going, it's going to these niche focuses, right? No one wants the big shotgun approach right now. Back to you became excellent in MAA, and people become excellent as a dentist. I'm trying to tell kids, just focus on that one thing to become excellent at because information is free. And so people can Google it and get information, but you being excellent at it, putting in those repetitions, making those mistakes, that is going to be the ability to impact people's lives in a way that just information alone can't. So I'm really trying to stress people to go there because I said, if you've got that expertise, Dan Kennedy calls it the ACE strategy, authority, celebrity, exclusivity. The authority takes the longest time, man. Look, you've been putting in reps since high school. Yeah. So all of that takes the longest time. Then if you're really great, you got to figure out, how do I become the celebrity so people all know that I'm great? And then all of a sudden you become exclusive because all the best want to work with you. So I'm really trying to point people in that direction. And then if they do that, I think what you're saying, all these tools, there's so many things that you can start up, but they don't believe that.
Yeah. Well, and the consistency. I think it's one of the greatest things that I've been given the blessing of the experience that I've had is, man, I've had to be so consistent and I've had to do it every single day. And for me, it was just wrestling practice. And it sounds really, really hard to a lot of people. But it had become very commonplace for me, wrestling practice, and then all my MMA practices, but it was showing up every single day, right? And you're talking about show up and do that one thing and do it excellently and set yourself apart, be set apart from everybody else in your field if you can, but then also be willing to do it for longer than everyone else is willing. Do it with enthusiasm long after everybody else loses steam and they decide to go somewhere else. Because I don't think that we don't reach our goals not because of a certain roadblock that absolutely stopped us, but a clear path to a lesser goal, right? You know, it's like, I want this thing to happen. It's not that I hit a roadblock and I couldn't find a way around, above, beneath, jumping over it, climbing over it. I just saw another opportunity to go down this other path to a little bit lesser goal, and I concede on the goal. I know I said I wanted that. That's the thing that I really have my heart set on, but I'll just settle for this because that path is easier. There's some guardrails there where I won't fall off. There's less pebbles to walk through. There's less river to walk through, right? So man, I've been given that experience so many times, and it really is all comes down to consistency. Because people say, man, you work so hard. No, I don't work hard. I do work hard, but it's not even about the hard work. It's about the consistency. It's about the reps. It's about the law of the 10,000 hours, right? It's like, if I knew in college wrestling, even though I was the lowest guy on the totem pole, probably the worst guy on the team, definitely the worst guy on the team, if I got an extra workout in than all the other guys did every single day, I get almost an entire season in one. I get 2 seasons while everybody else got 1 season. So I was willing to put in the extra work, but also consistently show up every single day.
Kind of reminds me of that movie, Karate Kid, right? Where Mr. Miyagi has him out there painting fences and doing all this shit, and like he doesn't understand, like, why am I doing this? And all of a sudden it comes together, and and I tell people to focus on that one thing. What they don't realize, I'm also telling them, is by doing that one thing at the highest level, you are learning so much more about business, about building relationships and all those things. And like you said, I think people just don't do it for long enough. They give up too soon. They don't go through those frustrations. They don't understand sometimes you got to eat top ramen noodles. Or in my case, I had a college degree. I was making $100,000, left my business, and I was all of a sudden washing cars on the weekend to be able to get my business to get off the ground. They don't want to do that. I always talk about a story of someone who started in the same financial services training program as I did, and he gave up after 2 years, and he's still today barely struggling to make ends meet. And he had a call with me 3 years ago. He saw me on TV. He said, I just want to congratulate you for sticking it out. I wish I would have done the same thing. Part of me, I get him, it breaks my heart because I want to help him. I actually even tried to hire him early on, but he left because there was something that paid him a little bit more money than he could have. But it's that thing where it's going to take them a lot more time. And that's the pros and cons, the love and hate of the internet of what I have is social media is great because it gives me a great audience, but it also gives an audience to people who are trying to deceive people, make things look a lot easier than they do, and not telling them the true story of what it really takes.
The true story and not the competency of what I said. One of the age old biblical principles is like, in order to be trusted with the lot, the big, you must first be able to be trusted in the small. And like I said, for me, the small was all the losses, all the setbacks, all the training when nobody knew who I was, and wrestling in front of 500 people at the Hearn Center, and then fighting in Bellator away from the real mainstream masses, until, what was the ACE strategy? Like the authority, the celebrity, like the celebrity, if you call it, didn't really come till I was 34 years old, So I could all of a sudden turn the phone on me and say, hey guys, I've been grinding, I'm an expert at this fighting thing or mental toughness or whatever it is. But then if you really do a deep dive, you're like, okay, well, he's been doing it for 20 years, 2 decades. And with the internet, it is so easy for anybody to pop up and say, hey man, let me teach you how to do this. And you're like, well, wait, how are you going to teach me how to build a business if you never built a business yourself, And maybe part of it is I got a little bit of envy because I'm like, man, I wish I had that kind of self-love.
But it's not sustainable.
No, it's not sustainable. And I think it's more importantly just doing it authentically yourself. I do know that I have more authority, celebrity, and exclusivity, like you said, ACE. I know I have more of that than I give to people when it comes to like, I have earned the right to be able to turn the camera on myself. Let me talk to you about my struggle through this fight. Let me talk to you about how your life can be shaped through the experiences that I have had. Yet a lot of times I just don't do it because I'm, maybe I feel like I don't deserve to do it, feel less than, once again, it's the enemy kind of keep me small. So
yeah, well, it's tough, man. And that's the other challenge that I have with people who put in the work. They deserve the notoriety. They really can impact people's lives, but they're so afraid of self-promoting. And I guess there's a fine line between self-promotion and telling people that I'm good at this and changing lives. And I always tell people, it's like, I tell my financial advisors, it's if you don't get out there and tell people, there's a dozen shitbags on social media. They're going to do it. They're going to get it. And these are the calls that we're getting like, hey, I got scammed by crypto. Or Rob, is that you telling me you got this deal for me in Bermuda? Like, no, that's not me.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. And I think, like you said, self-promotion, right? I mean, the funny thing is, if it was like, hey, can you do me a favor and help promote my this or my financial academy? Like I would be more apt to promote your thing than I would be to promote my thing, right? It's because I think it once again goes back to maybe similar to you and I have this 5-year-long deep relationship, and I finally ask you for something, finally ask you for a favor, finally ask you for a quote unquote handout. But I'm fearful that maybe you thought that I only was using you, right? I think part of it too is I have such a a deep fan base of people who don't necessarily know me personally, but they've seen me and watched me from afar and know my message and know how I operate. They know enough and have not heard bad things about me long enough to know that I'm a pretty decent guy, that I've gotten to the point where I'm like, well, now I'm just like a little bit afraid to sell you guys anything.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want you guys to think that I spent all this time to bring you so much value. What was the book by Gary Vee? Jab, 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 right hook, right? And it's such a sound strategy, because should it not be that way? Because imagine if Gary Vee was hey, I'm a jab, right hook guy. I give you a little tiny bit of value, but I got to ask you for something. But Gary gave all this information, all this free training, all this free value to people, and doing these things that are ROI negative. He talked about this, doing things that are ROI negative, that are actually ROI positive down the line, because you build this reputation with people. So I think this self-promotion and selling people things is really tough. I actually had somebody on my Instagram say something about that today. Like, buy my course for $39.99, 3 easy payments. And I'm like, I almost texted back or messaged back, which I'm glad I didn't, but I was like, I literally sell nothing. Mm-hmm. Like, I literally don't sell anything. I've got my fitness app for $9.99 a month, but it's not like I'm out here selling anything. And I've got a book that's going to come out in the next year. And if you are,
so what?
No, exactly, yeah. So I think, if anything, once again, let this be a message to everybody out there who feels like they're playing small, that even me, I'm dealing with it right now after all the things that I've done and all the things that I've accomplished. Like, it is to be human. It is uniquely part of who a lot of us are, that we're afraid to sell things or rub people the wrong way. But if you know and you believe in your mission and you believe in what you bring to the table, there's no reason why you shouldn't use that to impact the most amount of people. And if it costs a little bit of money or there's an entry fee, it's part of it.
Well, I think unless you're a sociopath, I think most people, the hardest person to sell is yourself. Yeah. I know for me, like, I made my first $1 million at 30 years of age, but I put a lot of hard work into doing that. And one thing that you talked about before is imposter syndrome. That was one thing I had when I made that money. I was in wealth management industry. I was like, okay, did I do the right thing by people? Was that maybe not the right investment? Or what was this? Or what was that? But then I realized, like, okay, I know what I'm doing because I made the investment. I have 3 college degrees, and I've worked with the best out there, and I've worked for free, and I've asked questions. And if I don't change somebody's life, no one's going to do it. And look, business isn't altruism, right? I've got people that need to, so if I'm going to charge for something, I have to, because I have other people that need to get to the same point that I am. So I don't think you should feel guilty about that. But there's a difference also, I think, between, I ditched imposter syndrome a long time ago. Now it's just about gratitude. Like, I feel really grateful to have the opportunity. I really feel like truly feel grateful that you took the time away from your three kids, away from your wife, away from other opportunity to come here and share your message with other people. And I appreciate that. But look, I took enough of your time already. I think you shared a lot of wisdom. Your story is amazing. It inspired me. The way you talk about your wife inspires me. The way you talk about your kids inspires me. More important than the NCAA qualifiers and the chat. I don't even want to talk about that, because I think there's so much more to you that people don't know. And that's why, hopefully you're not offended I didn't ask you a lot about your wrestling career, but I'm much more interested in the human being you are and the impact you're going to make in the next chapter. So what's next for you? Where you go from here, and how do people get in touch with you? Promote yourself. How can people support you? What are you looking to do?
Fanatics Fest this weekend. We talked about that. No, I got
Unfortunately, this won't air until that's over.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, I'm just right now. I am in a season of exploration and foundation building. With all the different relationships that I've accrued over the years, really asking God for wisdom of what is next. Like, how can I be used to the best of my abilities to reach the most amount of people. Obviously we do a lot of messaging on Instagram. Like, Mike Chandler MMA is where we send a lot of stuff. And all of my stuff has a very similar thread. Believe in yourself more. You were created for way more than you could ever think or imagine. Stop playing small. Give yourself permission to be the best. Like, somebody has to be the best. Why shouldn't it be you? If you are a man or woman of integrity, a man or woman of character, of hard work, of stick-to-itiveness, of determination, why shouldn't you be successful? And that's our big message. We've got our Walk on Wisdom podcast, and I've got a couple big things that I'm working on right now that I do believe is way bigger than anything that I've ever done in mixed martial arts at all, that I'm really excited to share with you, maybe off camera here soon. But No, man, I just thank you for the platform. Thank you for the opportunity. And anybody out there who is listening, like I said, man, I was a small guy from a small town who was taught to do small things. And after years and years of grinding and years of getting after it, I haven't completely silenced that little guy, but I have gotten really good at duct taping him to the basement of my mind. And there are no limits to what we can do if we stay connected to our gratitude and our why. So thank you for having me.
Thanks so much, man. Michael Chandler, amazing. Go follow this guy. If you guys like this, please share it, especially this episode. There's so many people out there right now that are struggling, that are looking for something, that don't believe, that have been told they couldn't. Share this with them, inspire them, point them in the right direction. I believe in all of you guys. Thanks for watching The American Capitalist. Michael, thanks so much, man.
You got it. Thank you.